Pokémon Court. Sootopolis City, a traditional trainer fought a battle against Wallace, the representative of coordinators, and established the prominence of Pokémon Contests. Lilycove City, he attained the title of the youngest ever senior breeder, leaving a permanent mark in the records of the Breeder Association. Returning to Cerulean City as a trainer, he easily defeated bug catchers with a single Pokémon and dominated the battles against the shorts-wearing kids along the way. This is actually a ordinary Pokémon fanfiction story, where the protagonist transmigrates to the real Pokémon world and embarks on a journey of exploration and personal growth, starting from Fallarbor Town. Chapter 1, Old Greenhouse. Hone Region, Northeast, Fallarbor Woods. The gloomy and dense forest formed a natural maze, separating the empty chimney at the center from the outskirts of Fallarbor Town. With the rise of the trainer profession, although the Pokémon League began to emphasize the development of the areas outside the city to create a safe travel environment for trainers, there are still many areas that are yet to be developed, and Fallarbor Woods was one of them. In these areas, there were abundant natural resources, but along with them came dangerous and unknown terrains, environments, and aggressive Pokémon, which made people hesitant to approach it. Fallarbor Town, located outside the forest, is a small agricultural town with a population of about a dozen households. Due to its proximity to empty chimney, whenever a breeze blew, volcanic ash from the mountain would drift here, providing rich nutrients to the local plants. Inside Old Greenhouse, Terence stepped out of the yard, his nose wrinkling slightly as he revealed a helpless expression. Beside him, a butterfly with aqua-blue compound eyes fluttered its beautiful wings. Under its manipulation, a sea of shimmering golden electric threads created a symphony of 1,000 birds chirping. It was a breathtaking sight. The glow of the threads illuminated Terence's face, making his youthful features beneath his golden brown, short hair look exceptionally handsome. This was beautifully practicing its signature move, Electro-Abe. The young boy's name was Terence, a member of the Old Greenhouse orphanage. In this sparsely populated small town, the Old Greenhouse was considered a rather unique building. It often gathered a group of children who played and laughed together. Watching beautifully dancing around him, Terence couldn't help but feel nostalgic. It's been almost a year, hey. Buzz, hearing that, beautifully nodded its head. A year ago, Beautifully, who was still a wormhole, crawled out of its habitat in the grass and forest to escape a flock of taillow who were hunting for food. After wandering around, the little one found its way to the old greenhouse. Then, this timid wormhole was caught by the lively children and became the target of their amusement. Fortunately, Terence noticed it in time and stopped the children, rescuing the wormhole. The children were not bad at heart, and soon enough, Wormhole received sincere apologies. They quickly bonded with it and enjoyed each other's company. And in the end, even Terence didn't expect that this little fellow, who had been wandering outside for a long time, would choose to stay here and naturally become part of the old greenhouse family. Taking care of Wormhole became Terence's responsibility for the past year. Due to spending too much time training with Beautifully, it was already noon. Looking at the ground piled with dust that hadn't been swept, Terence sighed. Beautifully, lend me a hand. Brushing off the dust from his clothes, Terence put his backpack aside and picked up the broom in the corner, intending to sweep away the fallen leaves first. However, at that moment, a crisp voice suddenly sounded in Terence's ear. He instinctively looked up and saw a little girl happily running towards him. Little Rena. Terence smiled upon seeing the girl. Rena was also an orphan from the old greenhouse, but they knew each other before they even entered the old greenhouse. Thinking back to the innocent little Rena who used to stick to him, and his own clumsy actions at the beginning, Terence suddenly stared blankly, as if he had traveled through time. Time flies, 4 years have passed. Terence was originally from Cerulean City. 4 years ago, he lost his family and was adopted by this orphanage. In these 4 years, life had been mundane and tedious. Fortunately, Terence gradually adapted to this new life and slowly pulled himself together in this familiar yet unfamiliar world. But no one knew that 4 years ago, Terence had been swapped. The current Terence hailed from another blue world, Earth. Brother Terence, what are you spacing out for? Little Rena walked over, staring at Terence with a puzzled look, her bright eyes twinkling as she spoke. Hearing little Rena, Terence snapped out of his thoughts, feeling a mix of confusion and melancholy. It's nothing. Are you hungry? Let me prepare lunch first, okay? Rena saw Terence's smile and felt delighted in her heart. She looked at the ground around her and said apologetically, sorry to trouble you, brother Terence. Taiga and I went to explore the cave over there in the morning, so I couldn't help you sweep. After speaking, Rena clasped her hands together and apologized with a smile. What are you doing now? Brother Terence, are you and Beautifully too busy to come? Let me help you. Just as Rena was about to start working, Terence shook his head and stopped her. No need, let Beautifully handle these tasks. It can handle them well. Then, can I help you with preparing lunch? Rena wanted to do something for Terence. I'll do it myself, but you two went to the cave without permission. Do you know how dangerous it is? Terence's tone turned serious. I've told you countless times not to wander off and stay obediently in the town. But you're always going outside yourself, Rena pouted, glanced at Beautifully, and felt a tinge of envy, then she muttered under her breath, it's not that dangerous outside, and there are many friendly Pokémon that often help us. You're just lucky, Terence sighed. It seems Grandma Arlen will have to give you a lecture. Let's prepare lunch for everyone. Today, it's your favorite bomb mushroom, and it will be the last meal I prepare for you all. Terence continued speaking, and as he did, his tone suddenly became somewhat gloomy. The last meal. Rena paused, realizing the hidden meaning in Terence's words. Brother Terence, what do you mean? Before Terence could answer, an old woman walked out and lovingly patted little Rena's head. Silly girl, haven't you figured it out yet? Your brother Terence has decided to leave this place. Leave this place? Rena stared blankly at Terence. Leave the old greenhouse. Meeting Rena's gaze, Terence remained silent. League Calendar, Year 209, Adoption Day. Both Terence and Rena were orphans from Cerulean City who had lost their ability to live independently. So, they were adopted by Arlen from the old greenhouse orphanage. Ever since arriving at the old greenhouse, Terence had been displaying remarkable maturity and responsibility in order to repay Grandma Arlen's kindness. He doesn't resemble a child at all. Within the old greenhouse, no matter the task, as long as he was capable, Terence would willingly take on the responsibility. Because of this, among the children in the old greenhouse, Terence had become like an older brother figure. Being relied upon by the children had become natural for Terence. Now, hearing that Terence was planning to leave, Rena couldn't help but feel reluctant and panic, which was only natural. After a moment of silence, Terence nodded. Grandma Arlen, I'm planning to head to Lilycove City tomorrow. Thank you for taking care of me these past 4 years. Why are you leaving? Is it because we weren't obedient? Rena's eyes began to well up, interrupting Terence. No, it's just that I want to see the outside world. Besides, I'm planning to take the breeder's examination. If I succeed, I will then be able to share some of the burdens of the old greenhouse. Terence said calmly. Grandma Arlen sighed. Terence, my dear, you need to think it through. The children here have grown up in poverty, and they don't even have the qualifications to register as trainers. Going out to make a living at such a young age, it's better to stay here and help me take care of the old greenhouse. I understand all that, Grandma Arlen, but I have hands and feet. Can't I take care of myself? I've been studying for these 4 years, all for this day. Terence's response unexpectedly showed determination. During his 4 years at the old greenhouse, Terence didn't just play like the other children. Instead, he studied diligently every day, accompanying the monotonous yet fascinating days with boring books, all in preparation for the day he could leave and see the outside world. To be honest, when Terence accepted the fact that he had transmigrated over, he was unwilling to stay in one place for the rest of his life. However, reality dealt a heavy blow to Terence. But Terence did not give up. Knowledge was an extremely important path he found for him to connect with the outside world. Unlike Earth, although this world had technology, the related content was very precious and advanced knowledge was monopolized by organizations such as the League and major corporations. Knowledge in the field of technology is considered high-end expertise and serves as an important means of balance within the League. In this world, technological advancement is rapid but hasn't reached the level of openness and strong demand for talent as on Earth. On the contrary, the mainstream in this world are the magical creatures called Pokémon. They have replaced technology and are sought after by people. Various industries revolve around them and are established based on them, making them indispensable companions in the lives of humans in this world. Terence studied the knowledge about Pokémons. Over the course of 4 years, despite the vast and diverse knowledge publicly available on the continent, Terence, driven by his own dreams, diligently established a structured learning system of his own. When Grandma Arlen heard him say this, she knew that Terence had thought it through and could only sigh, not saying anything else. Ever since Terence came here 4 years ago, he had been very sensible, not causing her any trouble, but instead, he had been helping her take care of the old greenhouse. However, Arlen could also see that Terence's mind was not here either. Although he helped take care of the children, Arlen, who had lived half her life, could naturally see the fundamental difference between Terence and these children. It was as if Terence didn't really fit in with this group of children. Although he was still young, Terence already possessed strong views of his own. It seemed that his heart had already flown to faraway places accompanied by books. Perhaps, on that adoption day 4 years ago, Grandma Arlen should have seen Terence's uniqueness from his calm and composed gaze and self-introduction. It was indeed unrealistic to keep someone like Terence in the small Fallarbor Town. Grandma Arlen didn't want to see such a future either. But even so, she didn't know why Terence was so persistent. It was hard to imagine that a 10-year-old child would have such strong determination and could make such a bold decision. This might be the best choice, Terence sighed in his heart. This world is filled with fantastical splendor and breathtaking beauty. For Terence, who came from another world, every place here attracts him, urging him to explore and venture beyond. At the same time, Terence also understood that the development of the old greenhouse had fallen into a period of decline over these years. Relying solely on Grandma Arlen's savings, it was difficult for the old greenhouse orphanage to operate for a long time. Therefore, not only for himself, but Terence also didn't want to burden the old greenhouse anymore. Even though he knew the road ahead would be difficult, Terence did not have any thoughts of backing down. Ever since he transmigrated over, Terence had wanted to experience the outside world. If he lacked the courage to do so, then it would be a disgrace to the title of transmigrator. What would be the difference between him and a salted fish then? There was no reason. He just wanted to witness the magnificence of this world. Chapter 2, Determined. In a place where various Pokémon live, the home continent, within Fallarbor Town. The aroma of food filled the entire old greenhouse. With satisfaction, he gazed at his masterpiece, the bountiful yet light and nutritious lunch. Terence left behind this final gift for everyone. He didn't know what he could achieve after leaving this place, but instead of settling for an ordinary life, Terence preferred to take risks and give his all. This world wasn't as beautiful as portrayed in the anime, and even to become an ordinary trainer, there were many conditions and limitations. Although Old Greenhouse was referred to as an orphanage, there were actually only 7 children, and the sole caretaker was Grandma Arlen. In her younger days, Grandma Arlen was a coordinator, but now she was all alone. Grandma Arlen had no descendants, so with her remaining savings, she established this orphanage called Old Greenhouse. Due to Grandma Arlen, the children grew up listening to her stories from her youth, which naturally sparked a great interest in becoming a coordinator. Almost every child in Old Greenhouse dreams of becoming an outstanding coordinator, and Terence was no exception. However, despite their usual liveliness, today the children appeared somewhat subdued. Clearly, they were already aware of Terence's decision to leave. Gathered around the table, a young boy finally couldn't hold back and spoke, "Brother Terence, are you really going to leave?" Terence nodded. He had been here for 4 years, and ultimately, he has always relied on Old Greenhouse. Although he has helped with many things during that time, it was not enough to repay the kindness he received from Grandma Arlen and Old Greenhouse. Without them, Terence couldn't imagine what kind of trouble he might have gotten into with his initial confusion and uncertainty upon arriving. Moreover, he hadn't inherited any property, so even facing a simple livelihood would have been a big problem. In his previous life, he had been alone, but Old Greenhouse had given him so many things he had never possessed before. So, now that things had come to this point, Terence couldn't just stay here any longer. The children had grown up and no longer needed his care. After years of accumulation, Terence felt it was time for him to embark on his own journey. Perhaps only by going out could he truly do something meaningful for everyone in Old Greenhouse. But, the voices of everyone were choked with emotion. Although they already know about Terence's choice, the thought of separation made them deeply reluctant. Their big brother, who had always taken care of them, was about to leave. Even if they could still meet in the future, the long-time separation was something these children under 10 years old couldn't bear. "Sigh, children, respect Terence's decision." At that moment, Grandma Arlen, with her hair now grey, entered the room. Upon seeing her, the children immediately made space for Grandma Arlen. "Grandma Arlen, you're here," the children said in unison. "Let's eat lunch, Grandma," Terence said. Faced with the children's attempts to persuade him to stay, Terence couldn't help but waver in his heart. Although he didn't consider himself as a child of their age, initially taking care of the children was a way to repay the kindness he had received. Despite often being troubled by these mischievous kids, after going through so much together and living with them for such a long time, it is only natural that one's heart softens. After all, humans are not devoid of emotions like plants and trees. Having lived here for 4 years, Terence didn't want to see old greenhouse become desolate and dilapidated many years later. "Let's eat," Terence said, looking at the children who were in low spirits. And so, urged by Grandma Arlen and Terence, the children hastily ate their lunch. The exquisite meal was spent in such a gloomy atmosphere. The cheerful atmosphere of the past could no longer be found. Although Grandma Arlen tried to lighten the mood, anyone could tell that both the children and Terence were absent-minded. The long lunchtime finally came to an end. "I'll go pack my things." After quietly uttering these words, Terence left the place. Lying lazily in bed, Terence's gaze was fixed upon the ceiling. Despite the children's heartfelt pleas to stay, none of it would sway his determination. Terence's steps, his inner voice, wouldn't allow him to stay in this place. Perhaps he might fail, but who can predict the future? Terence didn't make all those efforts for nothing over the course of 4 years. And when it comes to self-confidence, he naturally had an abundance of it. Beautifully. The beautifully fluttered above Terence's head, the only one to come and comfort him. It possessed some remarkable skills, which it expertly employed to meticulously assist Terence in cleaning the yard. Beautifully is Terence's first partner, the little companion he trained as a beginner. Growing up listening to Grandma Arlen's stories, Terence also became very interested in becoming a coordinator. Even Wurmple itself yearned for that glamorous stage. But reality made Terence realize that he had no advantages. After careful consideration, Terence finally decided to become a breeder. Becoming a breeder had significant advantages in Terence's current situation. Pokémon breeders, like a coordinator, are a type of trainer. They nurture a large variety of Pokémon. While their strength might be slightly weaker compared to professional trainers, their Pokémon usually forms a complete team. Moreover, they excel in areas such as growth, health, and breeding conditions, surpassing ordinary trainers in many ways. Most breeders earn their living through specialized work of daycare, and being a breeder is well suited for survival in this world. A remarkable breeder is indispensable in any place. If Terence could pass the junior breeder examination, his starting point would greatly improve, even allowing him to make a huge leap forward. After all, he was still so young. With age comes mature thinking, which was Terence's greatest advantage. Having such a good start, although the starting point may be somewhat low, there are many things that Terence wants to accomplish after arriving here. Knock, knock, knock. As Terence stared at the ceiling, he heard the sound of knocking on the door. "Come in." Without much thinking, he knew that the person who had arrived at this time was likely Grandma Arlen. "The children are feeling down," Grandma Arlen sighed as she entered. "I know," Terence said. "Child, you have always been so stubborn. It's just a trip, but you make it sound like a life and death separation." Shaking her head, Grandma Arlen looked at Terence with some confusion and helplessness. "It's not just a trip. Grandma Arlen, do you really think that if we keep staying at Old Greenhouse, with your savings, you could support us for long? Do you truly believe that these children can find the lives they yearn for?" Grandma Arlen fell silent. "So, for myself, for Old Greenhouse, I can only choose to leave." Lying in bed, Terence disregarded Grandma Arlen's shocked expression and spoke to himself. Terence understood that staying at Old Greenhouse, although it might provide stability and comfort for a while, it would also cause him to miss out on his greatest advantage. In the end, it would result in a complete and utter failure. Thus, Terence naturally voiced these thoughts. Perhaps, besides experiencing the beauty of this world, Terence was also worried about the Old Greenhouse. Terence didn't want to see the Old Greenhouse fall into ruin, so he could only change it through his own efforts. Chapter 3, Winds of Beginning. "Sigh, child, you really are hard to figure out." With a sigh accompanying her silence, Grandma Arlen's thoughts drifted back to the day she adopted Terence. Terence was born in Cerulean City of Kanto region, and at the age of 6, his parents passed away due to an accident. With insufficient support for basic living expenses, Terence quickly became homeless. Despite receiving subsidies from the League, he struggled to lead a normal life. At that time, Arlen happened to pass by Kanto, and with Terence's consent, went through a series of procedures with the League to adopt him under the care of the orphanage. Children like Terence are not the first, nor will they be the last, at Old Green House. But Terence was surely the most extraordinary child Arlen had ever seen. From his initial silence and aloofness to his later maturity and composure, with an understanding and empathetic nature, it was hard to believe that he was just a 6-year-old child. Moreover, Terence's intense passion for books astonished Arlen. Terence delved into knowledge that was dry and tedious, something most children his age would avoid. Arlen discovered that Terence not only became deeply engrossed in such topics but also analyzed them with great insight and relished every bit of it. Diligent, meticulous, and mature, Arlen sometimes almost forgot that Terence was an orphan she had adopted. In reality, Terence was helping her take care of the other children. Encountering you, I suppose, has been our luck. Looking into Terence's piercing gaze, Grandma Arlen felt a mix of laughter and tears. She had no idea what this child was always thinking about. He no longer had the innocence of a child. Sometimes, when she observed Terence's focus, Grandma Arlen even felt a hint of fear. This child was truly special, giving her a surreal feeling. "I'm sorry," Terence murmured, unsure how to continue the conversation. Regardless, he would not change his decision to leave the old greenhouse. After a long silence, Grandma Arlen turned her gaze towards Beautifully. "The reason I'm here is to tell you to take this child with you." With a gentle look at Beautifully, Grandma Arlen sighed, "It has also grown up." Hearing this, Terence suddenly froze. Take Beautifully with him? This idea had crossed Terence's mind before, but Beautifully was also a member of the old greenhouse. Although it was Terence who primarily took care of it, everyone here also contributed in their own way. In other words, Beautifully was not Terence's Pokémon. In fact, Beautifully had not been captured by anyone. Moreover, Grandma Arlen had been covering all the expenses for Beautifly's food. "Let it stay here to accompany the children." Shaking his head, Terence refused. Taking Beautifully with him would undoubtedly give him an advantage in his upcoming journey, but it would be too irresponsible. After all, Beautifully was not his personal possession. Each member of the old greenhouse had invested their efforts into Beautifully. "I knew you would say that, but the children have already agreed. They also hope that Beautifully can go with you to experience the outside world." Almost as if she had anticipated Terence's response, Grandma Arlen spoke up. "Take this." Grandma Arlen patted Terence's shoulder and handed something to him. "This is a Pokeball." The Pokeball was pure white in color, and as Terence examined it closely, his fist involuntarily clenched tighter. On the pure white Pokeball, there were scribbled names of the children. "I obtained this in a Pokémon contest when I was young. It's Premier Ball, with the same functions as Pokeball. However, it carries the support of children for you. Here, child, use it to capture Beautifully. With both of you embarking on this journey together, we can be more at ease." His eyes fixated on the Premier Ball, Terence's mouth slightly opened, wanting to say something, but in the end, he remained silent. Holding the Premier Ball in his hand, Terence felt its weight and warmth. The silence didn't last long. Finally, Terence looked at Grandma Arlen and said, "I understand. Leave this child to me. If it agrees to be my Pokémon, I will take it with me to fulfill the dreams of the children." Terence firmly nodded and said to Grandma Arlen. Then, Terence turned his gaze to Beautifully, who was hovering in the air, and stared at it. It seemed more like an inquiry. "Coo, coo." At this moment, Beautifully also seemed to understand everything that was happening. Seeing Terence's request, it didn't hesitate at all and let out a joyful cry. Terence's careful nurturing and companionship, the meticulous care during each evolution, and the arduous training they endured together, even though it was harsh and demanding, how could Beautifully ever forget the sweat they shed side by side? Becoming Terence's Pokémon had always been Beautifly's wish. "Congratulations," Grandma Arlen said with a smile. Despite her old age, encountering such a situation couldn't help but make her feel emotional. "Thank you," Terence said somberly, gripping the Premier Ball tightly. Grandma Arlen's smile remained on her face as she looked at Terence, finding it somewhat amusing. "You truly are a peculiar child." The pure white color of Pokeball symbolized the beginning of Terence's dream. Feeling the gentle breeze blowing in from the window, Terence looked at Beautifully, and his thoughts drifted back to the past. The scene of Terence and Beautifully welcoming the morning sunlight and practicing their moves together. Beautifly's string shot, shining under the sunlight, were like a sea of threads, forming a large net. Electric currents flowed through the net, emitting a crackling sound. Following Grandma Arlen's suggestion, Terence and Beautifully worked hard to upgrade their signature move, String Shot, into the powerful Electro-Abe. Terence put a great deal of effort in this special training. From the Wurmple stage, Terence meticulously trained Wurmple, ensuring that it didn't neglect String Shot. In Terence's eyes, if String Shot was used properly, its impact will be significant. So, besides the special training, Terence also made efforts to supplement Wurmple's diet with protein. He would often venture into the jungle alone to gather the bitter white berries, which could increase the quantity and enhance the toughness of the insect's silk. The flesh and leaves of the bitter white berries was the favorite food of bug-type Pokémon. After Terence blends them, the bitter white berries can provide better nutrition to Beautifully. After several months of their collective efforts, Beautifully's String Shot made great progress and gained good electric conductivity. Finally, with the help of Cherie Berry, Beautifully was able to learn the powerful move Electro-Abe, thanks to its unique bug powder. This was the greatest achievement during the year that Terence and Beautifully spent together. Apart from that, Beautifully's excellent airflow sensitivity, precise control of wind speed, and the silver wind filled with various kinds of powdery scales are all the result of Terence and Beautifully's combined efforts. It could be said that while Beautifully's strength might not be outstanding, in the application of signature move, it was an excellent contender, a little one born specifically for Pokémon contests. Because it carried the splendid dreams of all the children in the old greenhouse, along with Grandma Arlen's experience, it had received the greatest support in its growth. The gentle breeze blew again, instantly bringing Terence back to reality. He knew that this was the wind of beginning bidding him farewell. Chapter 4, For a Better Future. Time passed quickly, and on this day, Terence was preparing to depart. The children didn't come looking for Terence, unable to face the farewell. But Terence knew that the next day, when he was about to leave, everyone would come to bid him farewell with tears. He knew these little fellows too well. Morning arrived, the sky was clear with no clouds, a stark contrast to yesterday. In the early morning, the sunlight was gentle. Inside the old greenhouse the children arrived at Terence's door with carefully prepared gifts. However, when they pushed the door open, they found the room empty, with no one inside. Only a neatly written letter was placed on the desk. Seeing this scene, the children's hearts clenched. Little Rena, holding back her tears, stepped forward first and picked up the envelope left by Terence. Everyone, by the time you are reading this letter, I believe I will have already departed. I hope that after I leave, I won't inconvenience anyone. Don't be sad about my departure. Although there are times when I find you little rascals annoying, I still loved the joyful atmosphere of the old greenhouse. Rena, remember not to be mischievous anymore. If you get bullied by Puchayana again, Beautifully won't be there to save you. Ian, you're the oldest among the children besides me, and also the most responsible. Remember to take good care of your younger siblings. Taiga, stop being picky about food. Once I'm gone, there won't be anyone specially cooking for you. Chisana, I know that among the children, you've always yearned to become a coordinator. Trust me, I'll stand on that final stage with Beautifully. But if you keep playing around, you'll never be able to reach your dreams. Scarlet, you were the first to follow Grandma Arlen. You know she's getting older, so make sure to supervise everyone so that they don't make her angry. Show Grandma Arlen more care. Mayu, you're the youngest among us, everyone's little sister. Remember to listen to your older brothers and sisters. Once I'm gone, no one will clean up your messes. Lastly, Grandma Arlen, thank you very much. Everyone, please don't worry about me. When I return, I will definitely make the old greenhouse even better and bigger and free everyone from their current lives and allow everyone to have the life they long for, with the right to pursue their dreams. Terence. The surroundings were quiet, except for the sound of little Rena's sobbing. Soon, the envelope passed through everyone's hands, and silence fell upon them. At that moment, Grandma Arlen arrived and, observing the children's actions, she knew what had happened. Having experienced many things herself, she couldn't help but feel a surge of sadness. She didn't know how to comfort the children. Perhaps letting things take their natural course would be the best outcome. Upon seeing Grandma Arlen, little Rena immediately rushed towards her. Among the children, little Rena had the closest bond with Terence. The separation now had the biggest impact on her. Grandma, when I grow up, I'll definitely find Brother Terence and bring him back. Her words were incoherent as tears covered her face. Gently stroking little Rena's head, Grandma Arlen comforted her, I believe in you, little Rena. You'll be able to bring your brother Terence back. Though she said that, Grandma Arlen couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It's not that easy. She just hoped that this little rascal, Terence, would set aside his pride and return back after facing setbacks in the outside world. It's not so simple to navigate this chaotic world with the identity of a child. Despite hailing from affluent households and holding the official trainer qualifications registered by the Pokémon League, the number of newcomers in a region each year amounts to nearly 100. However, only approximately 1/10 of them succeed in obtaining all 8 badges and challenge the regional league tournament. As for trainers who got eliminated in the league conference, their numbers were even higher. Take, for example, the Evergrande conference in the Hone region. Even if one reached the top 16, they couldn't rely solely on their identity as a trainer to make a living. Only those exceptionally talented trainers have the possibility of gaining recognition from major corporations and even the Pokémon League. In this society, only the champions are valued. Only those who ascend the throne of the League Conference Championship hold significance, as they bring forth the corresponding celebrity effect for the major corporations. People often forget who came in second place but can remember who the champion is. Trainers who want to make a name for themselves must challenge the tournaments, defeat all opponents, experience the baptism of the finals, and ascend the champion's throne to have a chance at receiving the best, greatest, and most valued attention. Terence doesn't have the same resources as others. As someone who grew up in poverty, people like him often end up as roadside bug catchers. Successfully managing an orphanage is not as simple as it may seem. Without obtaining the qualifications of a trainer, one cannot enjoy the convenience offered by Pokémon centers. The things Terence took with him were simply not enough to sustain him for a long time. Arlen sighed deeply in her heart. We have to believe in him, Grandma Arlen said to the children. Even so, Arlen chose to believe in Terence. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let Terence, a child without trainer qualifications, travel alone. She recognized Terence's determination and intelligence, which led her to support his choice. Otherwise, even if Terence was stubborn, Arlen wouldn't let a child who hasn't experienced the world face it alone. Yes, I believe that Brother Terence will definitely succeed, little Rena whispered, her voice choked with emotion, as she nestled in Arlen's arms. The other children, each with their own emotions, looked out the window and nodded vigorously. These orphans, who lost their families for different reasons, would most likely grow up in poverty if nothing unexpected happened. Grandma Arlen's savings were decreasing day by day. If they were lucky, the children might find ordinary jobs in the future, barely able to support themselves and live out their lives. But if unfortunate, they would once again face poverty and dejections. Pursuing their own life and dreams may be just wishful thinking. What can these children with no background rely on to pursue them? Their burning passion? Of course, it's also possible for the children to encounter a significant turning point and stumble upon significant opportunities, leading to a smooth sailing life. But what are the chances of that happening to a poor orphanage? Ultimately, one cannot decide their life based on an unknown future. Therefore, Terence boldly went out, not only for himself but also for the old greenhouse. Relying solely on the elderly Grandma Arlen is no longer enough. He must also shoulder his responsibilities. At times, Terence may reflect on his journey and feel a pang of sadness. However, he believes that everything will eventually get better. He is not one to blame others or fate. He knows that he must struggle and work hard to achieve everything. That's his character. A ray of sunlight from the sun pierced through the forest and illuminated Terence's determined face as he carried his backpack on his back. Terence doesn't know how long he can sustain his journey with the limited supplies in his backpack, but that's not the main concern. No matter how arduous it may be, it's all for a better future. Chapter 5, A Fool's Dream. For this long journey ahead, Terence had prepared an ample amount of food and water. On the first day, he only managed to cover about 10 kilometers before it got dark. One reason was that the road was difficult to traverse, and the other was that his body couldn't withstand prolonged physical activity. Whenever he felt tired, he would take a short rest, and when he felt hungry, he would eat berries or dried rations to satisfy his hunger. Fortunately, he had Beautifully accompanying him, so he didn't feel too lonely. In case they encountered any dangerous situations, Beautifully could take care of them to some extent. Terence's goal was Slateport City, a large city that was the closest to Fallarbor Town. However, even so, it would take him about a week to reach there on foot. Terence wants to go to Lilycove City first to participate in the breeder's examination. However, although Lilycove City was also in home region, it was too far away from Terence's current location. If he were to travel on foot, it would take him several months, and besides, it was impossible for Terence to cross the ocean on foot. Therefore, he had no choice but to go to the harbor in Sootopolis City. Taking a ship was the fastest way for him to reach Lilycove City. Traveling by foot was tedious, especially in the wilderness where you could face unpredictable weather and unknown dangers that could strike at any time. However, Terence managed to overcome all of it. As someone without trainer qualification, he couldn't even stay at a Pokémon Center when he reached a populated area. As for a hotel, his meager savings didn't allow him to afford one. These are all prepared for the breeder examination, and Terence couldn't afford to waste any of it. Glug, glug. Passing by a lakeside, Terence took out his water pouch and took a few sips of water, hastily quenching his thirst. Hee hee. Wiping off the water droplets lingering on the corners of his mouth, Terence smiled. After several days of travel, he was finally getting close to Sootopolis City. During his first long journey away from home, Terence had some difficulties adapting, but fortunately, he managed to overcome it all, and now he has become accustomed to this feeling. Along the way, Terence would occasionally pick some brightly colored wild fruits. It wasn't to allay hunger, rather, these things could be processed and had certain benefits for specific Pokémon. With proper preparation, he could sell them for a small amount of money, which was very important to Terence. The so-called breeders, apart from working at the daycare, would generally also engage in such activities. Flap, flap. Suddenly, a few taillows flew over and launched an attack towards beautifully perched on Terence's shoulder. Terence had become used to such occurrences as Taillow and Wurmple were natural enemies. Even if Wurmple has evolved, this situation would remain unchanged. If these two Pokémon were in different factions, like the current situation, war is likely to occur. It was only when both of them are captured and guided by a trainer that their relationship could improve to some extent. The four Taillows had sharp beaks shimmering with white light as they flew towards Beautifully and Terence. They were using Peck Attack, a basic move. Without much thought, Terence instructed Beautifully to defend. Beautifully unleashed a silver wind infused with Stun Spore, halting the four Taillow in their tracks. The difference in their levels was too great. Looking at the Taillows struggling to flap their wings, Terence and Beautifully didn't stay any longer, they immediately left the scene. Taillow doesn't know the meaning of backing down. If Terence and Beautifully had stayed, they would have faced unrelenting attacks from them. Well done, Beautifully. Terence quickly ran to a nearby fork in the path and praised Beautifully. Beautifully had been a great help to him during these days, especially with its move String Shot, which had helped Terence overcome numerous predicaments. Hoo hoo. Gently making a sound, Beautifully seemed pleased with Terence's praise. Let's keep moving forward. Dusting off his clothes, Terence sensed that Sootopolis City was not far away. To be honest, he really wanted to have a hearty meal. It didn't have to be anything fancy, warm and satisfying food would be more than enough. After nibbling on dry rations and berries for several days, Terence had grown weary of them. This made him regret not bringing cooking utensils along. How strange, why is there an Electrike here? Suddenly, a small dog-like Pokémon appeared in Terence's field of vision. Its body was predominantly green, with a yellow mark on its face. It was clearly Electrike. Looking at the bewildered Electrike, Terence shook his head. Electrike was considered a rare Pokémon, and its evolved form, Manectric, was also impressive. However, with Terence's current financial situation, he couldn't afford to take care of a second Pokémon. Besides, he didn't have any spare Pokeballs at the moment. So, he was just slightly surprised by Electrike's appearance. But he didn't regret it. His own circumstances meant that he couldn't capture too many Pokémon. He simply couldn't take care of each one properly with his current situation. Great potential and easy to care for, these were the two criteria for Terence when capturing Pokémon. Terence wants to achieve great things. It was not enough for him to possess exceptional knowledge alone, his Pokémons also needed to possess formidable strength. Otherwise, how could he help everyone in the old greenhouse pursue their own dreams? Making everyone in Old Greenhouse have the right to choose their own paths was Terence's greatest wish. He already considered the Old Greenhouse as his family, and he didn't want everyone there to live their lives aimlessly. However, Terence was well aware that it was easier said than done. It was 10 times, or even more difficult than sustaining the old greenhouse orphanage. Providing better conditions for so many children was far from easy. Terence was no longer the naive person he once was when he arrived. Normally, obtaining the trainer qualification alone required an expenditure of 100,000 yen, a sum that could be used by Old Greenhouse for a long period of time. Tien, here the author used currency as yuan, but I will use yen as the currency since it's similar to currency in Pokémon world. Moreover, these were just the basic expenses. The costs associated with acquiring starter Pokémon, maintaining and caring for the Pokémon, as well as covering the expenses of treating them, all required money. Hence, even families with relatively good financial situation, would hesitate to support multiple children in becoming trainers and boldly pursuing their dreams. But Terence was determined to work hard for it. Old Greenhouse was the fruit of Grandma Arlen's painstaking efforts, and Terence had always respected the elderly woman who took care of him in every way possible. So, the old greenhouse had always been cherished by Terence. Moreover, in his eyes, his dream wasn't just a fool's dream. Terence just wanted to give himself a goal, a motivation. Every time he thought of his responsibilities, Terence would sigh deeply, then remember the protagonists in the novels he had read. Each of them appeared unburdened and free, which makes him envious. Even if it's a fool's dream, in this journey called life, we must give it our all, right? Beautifully. As Terence teetered around the electric and walked along the forest trail, he gazed at the sunlight in the sky with a smile. He firmly believed that without a definite goal in life, there is no point in living. That's why, even if it seemed impossible to others, he still wanted to give it a try. Who? Beautifully, fluttering by his side, made a puzzled sound, not understanding what Terence was talking about. This made Terence burst into laughter. Chapter 6, Slateport City. Slateport City is a large city in the southern part of the Hone region. Slateport City was established here due to the clean water sources and abundant food, making it a rapidly developing local market and a great city for shopping. Over time, it further evolved into a bustling harbor city with ships frequently coming and going. Terence needs to rely on the ships here to reach Lilycove City, where the headquarters of the breeders is located. At this moment, Terence and Beautifully had already entered Slateport City after a week-long journey, making Terence look a bit travel-worn. However, Terence had no energy to care about his appearance. For now, he urgently needed to book an SS ticket so that he can head to Lilycove City. If he missed this breeder examination, Terence wouldn't be able to bear the fatal consequences of waiting another year. I'd like an SS ticket for Lilycove City. Terence arrived at the ticket counter in the shipyard after a long wait. It was finally his turn in the line. S.S. Ticket to Lilycove City, right? Please wait a moment. Also, do you have a membership card or trainer's credential? That way, you can enjoy a 10% discount, the ticket attendant said, manipulating the computer before looking up at Terence. No, Terence shook his head. In that case, please show some ID card, the ticket attendant said. Then, Terence handed his ID card to the attendant, who glanced at it and quickly typed a few words on the computer before returning it to Terence. Next, please verify your information. Name, Terence. Age, 10 years old. Birthplace, Cerulean City, Kanto. Current guardian, Arlen. Do you have any questions? The ticket attendant was spot on. After receiving confirmation, Terence paid 2,000 yen for the SS ticket, feeling a pain in his heart. It was almost his entire savings. Now that he had bought the SS ticket, he no longer had anything valuable on him. Great, registration is complete. Thank you for your support. Please don't miss the departure time. After receiving the SS ticket, Terence checked the information. The ship was called SS Title, and it was scheduled to depart tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. It seemed like he would need to stay in this place for one more night. Feeling a bit bored as he walked along the street, Terence suddenly remembered that he had some handmade trinkets in his backpack, although he didn't know if he could sell them. I remember there's an open-air bazaar in Slateport City. Recalling faintly, Terence thought of a place, Slateport Market, an open-air bazaar selling various items. Hastily arriving there, Terence suddenly realized that he didn't have a stall at all. Shaking his head helplessly, Terence wandered around. Since he had already come, he might as well take a look. Anyway, he had no money and wouldn't develop any thoughts of buying things impulsively. The items sold at the Slateport market were diverse. Terence couldn't help but click his tongue in astonishment at the plush dolls worth 3,000 yen. They were much more expensive than the SS ticket, and he couldn't help but wonder what purpose buying them would serve. In addition, there were various kinds of valuable berries, ranging in price from tens to hundreds of yen. There were also medicines produced by breeders, fluctuating in value at around 10,000 yen. Terence couldn't help but admire the money-making ability of breeders. Like a bottle of medicine that could increase a Pokémon's attack power, which was even being sold for a staggering 9,800 yen per bottle. Seeing similar prices for other medicines, Terence shook his head. These things probably required an intermediate breeder to produce, and judging by the stall owner's appearance, they were most likely just reselling goods, which explained the inflated prices. There are also things like this here. Terence looked surprised as he examined a small stove-shaped item, feeling somewhat surprised. It was the first time he had seen this thing in reality. He had only seen pictures and descriptions of it in books before. Sea incense, a curious-smelling incense that, when carried, boosts the power of water-type moves. Although it was a consumable item, it was still highly tempting to trainers. Sea incense was made from special flower petals. While it wasn't difficult to make, the value lay in cherishing the materials. Terence checked the price, and it fluctuated around 10,000 yen. A Pokeball cost only 200 yen, so it was obvious that these items were not meant for ordinary trainers. Not lingering any longer, Terence continued to wander to other places. Slateport City market was not that big, and Terence was quick in observing things, so it didn't take long before he had almost covered the entire market. Just as Terence was about to leave, he noticed a special stall. The stall owner was a girl wearing a hat, who appeared to be quite young. What caught Terence's attention was what the girl was selling. He walked up to the stall and discovered that it was filled with self-made medicines. The medicines were scattered on the ground and were without any descriptions, so there were only a few people who approached the stall. "Can I open it and take a look?" Terence asked the girl. Of course, the girl's voice was youthful, confirming Terence's speculation that she was around the same age as him. It was normal for Terence to make such a request since these medicines are used for Pokémons and buyers had the right to appraise them. After obtaining permission, Terence picked up a small bottle and pulled out the cork. He brought it close to his nose and fanned the faint scent of the liquid with his other hand. Without thinking too deeply, several names flashed through Terence's mind. Not in a rush to speak, Terence continued to look at a few other bottles. Besides similar liquid medicines, there were also some powdered substances that piqued his curiosity. After observing to his heart's content, Terence suddenly realized that his actions were a bit impolite. However, the bottle of medicine in his hand made him furrow his brows. If he wasn't mistaken, this medicine had some minor flaws. "Sorry for looking for such a long time." Expressing his apology, Terence asked, "May I ask if these medicines have been certified?" "What do you mean?" The girl with her face covered by the hat looked puzzled. "The other medicines should be fine, but this powder has some flaws. If I'm not mistaken, it is made from Gloom's saliva, Rindo berry, Gripa berry's leaves, and blue silver grass. It's a medicine that provides faster healing effects on the burn injuries of the grass-type Pokémon compared to Burn Heal." Terence knew the pharmacology of this powder, and the combination was not wrong. However, the issue lay in the saliva of Gloom. You used saliva from a female Gloom, but the correct recipe of the medicine requires saliva from a male Gloom. Although the side effects are not significant, it could lead to unexpected consequences in critical situations. Terence could tell the effects of most of the medicines at the girl's stall, except for a few whose principles he couldn't understand. But this bottle of powder made him hesitate. Thanks to reading about Gloom in a miscellaneous book, he learned that the saliva of Gloom could have subtle differences depending on the gender. "If you don't believe me, I suggest you get it appraised." Leaving those words behind, Terence walked away, and by the time the girl came back to her senses, there was no one in front of her anymore. Chapter 7, Setting Sail on SS. Title. Terence left in a hurry as he wasn't someone who liked to meddle in others' affairs. But the medicines prepared by the girl, most of which required knowledge at the level of a junior breeder, intrigued Terence a little. If he guessed correctly, these medicines were probably prepared by the girl herself. Despite her young age, she possessed the skills of a junior breeder, which surprised Terence and diminished his sense of superiority. Randomly encountering a young girl at a stall who was no less capable than him in the vast Hone continent made Terence realize that there were undoubtedly many talented individuals he was unaware of. Perhaps what he knew was really not enough. There were some bottles of medicines at the girl's stall whose underlying principles he couldn't quite grasp. Terence happened to notice the flaw in one of the powder medicines because this mistake is a typical case, and he happened to know the difference between the correct and incorrect combinations. This doesn't mean that the girl was inferior to him, it simply shows his expertise in this particular field. This knowledge is something that he had coincidentally acquired, and even top breeders wouldn't claim to be all-knowing and omnipotent. I should just wait patiently. As he looked at the darkening sky, Terence prepared to quietly wait for the arrival of tomorrow, which would confirm the results of his 4 years of effort and require passing the examination of a junior breeder. Once he became a junior breeder, he would finally have the confidence to live in the outside world on his own. Finding a relatively open area, Terence set up his tent and released beautifully. Pokémon were more vigilant than humans, and by being together, they could take care of each other and prevent unexpected incidents. It was another peaceful and serene night. Terence's last night in Sootopolis City passed without anything happening and it quietly came to an end. The next day, as the sky gradually brightened, wing mules crossed the ocean, gliding through the air with the help of the sea breeze. Early in the morning, Beautifully also woke up and awakened Terence by flapping its wings. Terence glanced at the time, 6 o'clock. There was still an hour before the departure of the SS. Title, so he wasn't in a hurry. Beautifully is very punctual with its daily schedule. By having it wake up Terence, there was no need to worry about being late. After organizing his belongings, Terence packed up the tent, found a water source to wash his face, and headed towards the harbor. Although it was still early, there were already many people boarding the ship. By the time Terence arrived, there were already quite a few people outside the harbor. There are so many people. Terence grumbled. In the bustling harbor, the flow of people was constant. Even though the staff tried to maintain order, it was difficult to improve the situation. Who knows how much time was wasted, but Terence finally boarded the SS. Title. It really wasn't easy, there were too many people. The other passengers who boarded along with him also sighed. Next was finding his own room. In reality, the room wasn't of much use. It would take less than a day to travel from Sootopolis City to Lilycove City on the SS. Title. The so-called room was just a crude place to rest. After all, SS. Title was not a luxury cruise ship. Terence was alone, so he simply stayed in his room. However, after a while, there was a knock on Terence's door. Hello, it's lunchtime. Would you like to go to the dining hall? The person at the door was a staff member of the SS. Title, responsible for reminding passengers to have their meals. As for whether Terence would go to eat or not. Touching his empty pockets, Terence smiled bitterly. He decided to continue snacking. The food on the SS. Title was not something he could afford. It was already noon, and since Terence had just finished eating and had nothing else to do, he lay down on the small bed and took a nap. After sleeping for about an hour, Terence felt a bit dizzy and regretted sleeping on the ship. To clear his head, Terence walked out of the room and went to the ship's railing to feel the sea breeze. Indeed, after spending a few minutes there, he felt much better. Beautifully, come and experience it too. Beautifully, just like Terence, was on a ship for the first time and seemed curious, flying around in the surroundings. Don't get lost, Terence reminded. Then, Terence, all alone, leaned against the railing on the deck, facing the blowing sea breeze. His gaze wandered towards the vast blue ocean ahead, lost in his own thoughts. Is this your Pokémon? A robust, elderly voice interrupted Terence's thoughts, causing him to turn his head. What he saw was an elderly man with graying hair, who appeared to be around the same age as Grandma Arlen. He was currently looking with interest at Beautifully, flying above Terence's head. Yes, is there something you need? Terence responded. Seeing Terence's lukewarm attitude, the old man smiled and nonchalantly asked, You've done a good job raising it. Are you a trainer? No. Terence, who looked to be around 10 years old, shook his head and recalled Beautifully, which gracefully landed on his shoulder after spinning around. Oh, then you're a coordinator. The old man became even more curious as he observed Beautifully's graceful landing. Not quite. Terence answered the old man's question again, and to avoid his endless inquiries, he continued, I'm actually preparing to go to Lilycove City to participate in the breeder examination. You're saying you're a breeder? The old man burst into laughter, finding Terrence's response amusing and unexpected. Not yet. After saying that, Terrence turned his head, ready to leave. He instinctively regarded the old man's laughter as mocking. A 10-year-old breeder was indeed seen as a joke by many. Being a breeder was different from being a trainer or a coordinator. The latter didn't have any threshold requirements, but for the former, due to the rigorous nature of the profession, they needed to be certified by the breeder headquarters to call themselves breeders. Being a breeder involved a complex set of knowledge that required a long time of study to achieve the necessary level. Considering Terrence's young age of 10, it was truly inconceivable to most people for him to go for the breeder headquarters examination. After all, at this age, children were just obtaining their trainer qualifications and were still very immature. Most children couldn't even remember the names and attributes of Pokémon, let alone the intricate pharmacology and the deeper habits and characteristics of Pokémon. So, while the old man's laughter seemed quite rude to Terrence, he could understand it. After all, he knew firsthand the challenges of becoming a breeder. After 4 years of studying, Terrence was no longer a complete novice who knew nothing. You've misunderstood, my name is Victor, and I didn't mean to mock you. Seeing Terrence walking away, the old man quickly called out to him. Terrence, who was stopped, didn't feel displeased. Instead, he continued to ask, I understand, sir. Is there anything else? Chapter 8, Top-Level Master. Anything else? Not really, I was just curious seeing such a young kid like you, the old man named Victor observed beautifully once again, expressing his admiration. What are you curious about? Terrence asked. A 10-year-old participating in the breeder examination, isn't it worth being curious about? The old man asked in reply. True, Terrence nodded. Seeing that Terrence didn't deny the guess about his age, the old man was somewhat surprised. Since you claim to be a breeder, then is this beautifully the one you've raised? The old man asked again when he saw no response from Terrence. More or less. Although Terrence had the help of everyone at the old greenhouse, he was the one who was mainly responsible for taking care of beautifully. Impressive, the old man commented. Terrence still couldn't grasp the old man's intentions. The old man's words only served to confuse Terrence even more. Don't be nervous, relax. Just treat it as a normal conversation. The old man chuckled, as he hadn't seen such an interesting youngster in a long time. Despite the seemingly crude way the beautifully was raised, if such an accomplishment was attributed to Terrence, it would indeed be quite remarkable. If Terrence was being given the praise of good breeding, it would indicate that he had at least reached the level of a junior breeder, and Terrence was just a teenager. Besides little June, I've never seen such an outstanding youngster before. I must be getting old, the old man sighed when Terrence remained unresponsive. Little June? Is she also a breeder? Realizing that the old man simply wanted to have a chat, Terrence decided to relax and go along with it. Since he has some free time on his hands, it would be a good way to pass the time. What about not talking with strangers? To hell with it. If you are 10 years old, that would be similar to little June. Impressive. Little June is also preparing to take the breeder examination. Who knows, maybe you two will become competitors, the old man sighed. Is she also on this ship? Terrence was somewhat speechless. Was it really such a coincidence? She's still having dinner. I came out for some fresh air after finishing mine, the old man said naturally, then he pointed and smiled, look, she has come out too. Upon hearing this, Terrence instinctively looked in the direction the old man was pointing. Soon after, a girl with pink hair appeared in front of Terrence. But before he could say anything, the girl exclaimed in surprise, it's you. Me. Terrence was genuinely confused, not understanding what the girl meant. Do you know each other? The old man was also very surprised. Teacher, the girl called Little June respectfully greeted the old man. He's the person I told you about. Are you the kid who found the mistake in her medicine? The old man was also amazed, never expecting such a coincidence. Listening to the conversation between the two, Terrence finally understood, and it suddenly dawned on him, so it's you. At that time in Slateport City, the girl had her face and hair covered by a hat, so Terrence didn't immediately recognize her. But now, hearing her voice, it was indeed very similar. Nice to meet you again. I'm June Joy, she extended her hand, playfully winking at Terrence. Terrence. Without hesitation, Terence also extended his hand, and the two of them reintroduced themselves. However, the surname Joy caught Terence's attention. Pokémon centers in various populated regions were monopolized by the Joy family, and the girl in front of him had the surname Joy. It made him ponder. The histories of the Joy and Jenny families can be traced back to the establishment of the Pokémon League. At this moment, Terence also became curious about June Joy's address to the old man as teacher. It was not a term used casually. According to the old man, June Joy was also preparing to take the breeder examination in Lilycove City. A 10-year-old breeder, combined with the background of the Joy surname, made him start to suspect the true identity of the old man. Perhaps this old man is also a formidable breeder. This also explains his reaction when he heard that I am going to take the breeder examination. Who exactly are you? Terence looked at the old man and spoke again. Not knowing the other person's identity, there is a possibility that some misunderstandings might arise. Oh, me? Didn't I say it before? I'm Victor, and I am also a breeder. The old man chuckled, nonchalantly responding. Upon hearing the old man's explanation, June Joy, who was standing beside them, showed a helpless expression and added for Terence, teacher is also a breeder and holds the highest title among breeders. A top-level breeder. Receiving this information, it was within reason, yet also unexpected. Terence was surprised. Aren't top-level breeders considered as a group of people with distinguished status in this world? What this status represents? How could he not know? Who is capable of carrying the title of a master? Elite Four members, as well as regional champions, renowned professors in various regions, and even the Pokémon Contest masters above top coordinators. Apart from them, there were also the top-level breeders. Being addressed in the same manner as those individuals, the status of a top-level breeder was self-evident. Even a single comment from a top-level breeder regarding a Pokémon is considered extremely valuable and hard to come by. My apologies, Master Victor. Terence expressed his regret for his earlier rudeness. Any master deserves respect, and especially so since he had misunderstood the old man. The old man's curiosity should have just been a concern for a younger generation. Haha, it's no big deal. So, you're the child little June mentioned. No wonder it seemed so coincidental to keep encountering talented juniors like you. If you can make little June admit defeat, it seems you have some skills too. Master Victor teased. It was just luck. Terence spoke the truth. However, in the old man's ears, these words came across as modest and composed. I have already sought teacher's appraisal, and it was indeed my mistake. June Joy openly admitted her mistake without trying to hide it. There are still many areas where I have a lot to learn from June. Many of the medicines she made, I still haven't figured out the principles behind them. Terence shook his head. His past life's experiences have taught him to be low-key in such situations. Ha ha ha, that's only natural. Little June has me as her teacher, plus her talent is pretty good. That's how she reached the level of a junior breeder at the age of 10. But, you know, that's what makes you stand out, young man. The comments from a top-level breeder allowed Terence to have a clear understanding of himself. His 4 years of diligent studying must not have been in vain. A 10-year-old breeder could truly be considered a miracle. After all, Terence had spent over a decade as a student in his previous life. Learning and analyzing comes naturally to him, which is deeply ingrained in his bones. This was a tremendous advantage for any child under the age of 10. What could other kids of the same age, who were still playing with the mud balls or hide and seek, use to compete with someone who had undergone more than a decade of exam-oriented education? Therefore, Terence was at a loss. Chapter 9, So-Called Breeder. Victor is an experienced breeder who became a top-level breeder at a young age. Today, he holds an important position at the breeder headquarters. At the same time, he was also Little June's teacher. Little June, born into the Joy family, showed exceptional intelligence from a young age, especially in the field of breeding, displaying extraordinary talent. I remember the best record in the breeder headquarters should be the junior breeder examination passed at the age of 10, right? Looking at Terence and June Joy beside him, Master Victor smiled slightly, looking forward to their examination. As a top-level breeder, he naturally knew how difficult it was for a child who had just turned 10 to become a junior breeder. But it was precisely because of this that Terence and June's astonishing talent could shine through. Take the Joy family as an example. Every Nurse Joy stationed at the Pokémon Center was at least an intermediate-level breeder. Typically, they would pass the junior breeder examination at the age of 14 or 15 on average, and that was with formal training within the Joy family. So far, the youngest individual to pass the junior breeder examination, as recorded by the breeder headquarters, was at the age of 10. This is the highest record since the formalization of the breeder profession. Someone applying for the breeder examination at the age of only 10 was a rarity in the same regard as a legendary Pokémon. Little June was a relatively normal child with a good background. She had been exposed to a wealth of knowledge from an early age, and after displaying her talent, her family even hired a private tutor for her. So, it is acceptable for her to possess the level of a junior breeder at the age of 10. But this little rascal Terence was a bit terrifying. Victor was experienced and astute. From Beautifly's growth and Terence's appearance and habits, he could tell that Terence didn't come from a good background. However, it was precisely because of this that Victor couldn't help but admire Terence's talent. Having a renowned teacher and studying on your own were two completely different concepts. Talented individuals would emerge in every generation. As he watched Terence, Master Victor couldn't help but appreciate his abilities and would love to nurture this talent. If possible, he hoped to take Terence as his disciple and pass on his knowledge to him. The difference between Terence and Little June was that Terence was an ordinary person, while behind Little June stood an entire family. Victor was only invited to teach her the basics, and the relationship between them was of a so-called teacher and student. As for passing on his secret techniques of a master, it naturally required a formal master-disciple relationship. Victor is a very traditional old man after all. Of course, Terence was just an unexpected discovery for him. The choice of whether to accept him or not depended on Victor's assessment of Terence's character, background, and further observations. So far, he merely had high hopes for Terence. Teacher. As Master Victor absent-mindedly let out a faint sigh, Joy June noticed that the atmosphere had become somewhat awkward. Oh, it's nothing. I'm just getting old, and my thoughts can't keep up sometimes, Victor stretched, behaving somewhat lazily, not displaying the aura of a top master. Terence, are you here alone? Do you want to travel with us? Since you are also going to take the examination, it would be good to have some company, Master Victor looked around and said. Upon hearing this, Terence hesitated for a moment. There was no reason to refuse. For him, an invitation from a top master was an opportunity. For someone from a poor place like Old Greenhouse, traveling together this time could very well be the most important turning point in his life. It would be an honor to travel with Master Victor, Terence replied. Hearing Terence's answer, Victor smiled proudly, while June also stared at Terence, curious to see what this young man of her own age was capable of. Haha, very well. I think we still have some time before we reach Lilycove City. How about I give you both a test? The old man Victor suddenly had an urge to assess Terence's true abilities. Naturally, Terence and Little June couldn't refuse. With that, Victor led the two youngsters into the room. He pondered for a moment, and then questions continued to pour out of his mouth. Fortunately, although the questions were a bit tricky, they still fell within the scope of a junior breeder. Out of the 10 questions, Terence was able to handle 8 or 9 of them. As Victor continued to ask questions, he also gained a slight understanding of the two situations. If there's one thing that sets Little June and Terence apart, it's their knowledge base. June has him to teach her and a strong background, with a wealth of knowledge and practical skills that surpass Terence. However, Terence possesses superior comprehension and logical reasoning abilities compared to Little June. In other words, he has a sharp mind, quick thinking, and strong logical skills. You're both remarkable. Junior breeder examination won't pose a challenge for you, Victor smiled, expressing his satisfaction with Terence. His words were mainly directed at Terence, considering that June was his student, and her level was already well known to him. Impressive. June also expressed her admiration for Terence. It was the first time she had admired someone of her age. Terence's knowledge left her stunned. There was a moment of silence as Victor looked at these two talented newcomers. He couldn't help but feel a sense of lamentation. In recent years, there had been a continuous emergence of outstanding trainers, but the field of breeders was lacking new talent. Now, with the emergence of talents like Terence and Little June, the next generation of exceptional individuals, Victor, as a senior in the world of breeders, felt extremely gratified. After a brief thought, Master Victor posed another question to the two newcomers: what do you think a breeder is? This question from Master Victor differed from the previous ones, catching both of them off guard. After a few seconds of contemplation, Terence tried to answer, a trainer who helps Pokémon grow perfectly. Junjoy's response was similar to Terence's. Nodding in approval, Victor smiled and said, "That's a good answer. But would you like to hear my perspective?" "Of course," Terence and June replied in unison. After a moment of contemplation, Master Victor began, "The so-called breeder, in my opinion, encompasses many aspects. Helping Pokémon grow perfectly, as you mentioned, is indeed one of the hallmarks of a breeder. But being a breeder is not that simple. In fact, each breeder specializes in different areas. In the case of little June's family, they have made significant achievements in the field of healthcare and nurturing. And the top breeders in this category possess a comprehensive understanding of Pokémon's behavior, allowing them to create the perfect growth plans for their Pokémon. The Pokémon they breed excels in all aspects and can rival the main force of the top-level trainers. Furthermore, some breeders can even discern the potential and talents of Pokémon based solely on their development. The most famous example is Master Ian. He once guided a confused youngster and told him, "Choose it as your beginner Pokémon, and as long as you are not too incompetent, the future world will have a place for you." Later, that youngster, accompanied by his Pokémon, grew to become one of the Elite Four. Then there's Master Yarrow, whose most outstanding achievement was teaching a Snorlax, initially abandoned due to its poor innate abilities, nearly 40 different moves, spanning multiple types. Therefore, in my eyes, every breeder is an incredible individual. Victor chuckled. Terence, after hearing these examples, couldn't help but subconsciously ask, "And what about you, Master Victor?" "Me? I have always been focused on studying the genetics of Pokémon," Victor replied without concealing his specialization. Outside main text. Breeder is the main theme throughout this book. It is also known as Peug in Chinese, but I prefer the word breeder because it encompasses a broader and deeper concept. In my worldview, items like potion, antidote, heal powder, iron vitamin, and even rare candy in games are all creations of a breeder. Similarly, the Joy family can be considered a breeder family. They hold an unrivaled monopoly on the breeding knowledge of Pokémon healthcare and nurturing, with no one able to surpass their expertise. In the Emerald version game, there is also a stats judge known as the top Pokémon breeder at the battle frontier. If placed in the real world, individual values can be considered as innate talent or potential, and I believe it would be a fitting description. Of course, the efforts put in after birth are equally important. Items like silver powder, spell tag, and repel to prevent encountering Pokémon. There are so many examples that can be associated with the magical profession of a breeder. I aim to present a worldview that revolves around the identity of a breeder, which will assist Terence greatly on his journey to becoming an excellent coordinator or trainer. Chapter 10, Inherited Moves. Genetics. From literal meaning, Terence associated it with the biology he had learned in his past life and wondered if there was any connection between the two. However, when Terence tried to apply his existing knowledge to explain things in this world, he couldn't help but feel perplexed. In his past life, plants and animals could be explained through DNA, but in this magical world, some Pokémon were difficult to explain scientifically. Onyx, whose body was made entirely of stone, Magnemite, whose body is composed of magnets, and ghost-type Pokémon like Ghastly, which is enveloped in a cloud of smoke. Could these creatures be explained clearly? So, Terence raised his question, and even June was puzzled by it. "That's why we do research," Victor replied with a vague answer, smiling. "What about your main achievement, teacher?" June asked. Both Master Ian and Master Yarrow had remarkable achievements. Speaking of which, June, as a student of Master Victor, had no idea what her teacher's secret technique was. "Well, let me think. I could teach a Pokémon 3 or 4 moves, would that count?" Master Victor said. 3 or 4 moves. Not only June but even Terence felt puzzled. Just now, an example was given of Master Yarrow, a top-level breeder who taught a Snorlax with little talent, nearly 40 moves. However, at present, Master Victor is also a top-level breeder. How could he claim his achievement is teaching Pokémon only 3 or 4 moves? "Do you have doubts?" Master Victor asked. Both of them nodded. "Then let me ask you. Take the most commonly seen Taillow from the Hone region as an example. Can it learn Quick Attack?" Of course, it can. Not only could it learn Quick Attack, but it could also learn it easily. Taillow's race could effortlessly learn Quick Attack. Can it learn Steel Wing? It can. Without hesitation, June and Terence gave their answers. Although learning Steel Wing was not as easy as Quick Attack, it was still not a difficult thing. How about Rain Dance? At this question, June and Terence were both stunned. Rain Dance, this move, and Taillow's affinity seemed completely incompatible. While it is extremely difficult, there is still a slight possibility for Taillow to learn Rain Dance, Master Victor said with a smile. Now let me ask again, can Taillow learn Mirror Move, Refresh, or even Thunderbolt? Master Victor once again posed examples that neither of them had heard of before. Strictly speaking, through normal learning, Taillow would never be able to learn moves like Mirror Move or Refresh in its entire lifetime. However, through inheritance and the guidance of a breeder, nothing is impossible. And that is my achievement, teaching Pokémon moves that they could never learn in their entire lives through inheritance, Master Victor said with a hearty laugh. As he spoke, he seemed incredibly excited. Pokémon, these extraordinary creatures, can even mate and reproduce across different species. The combinations between these different species often bring about unimaginable wonders. I conduct research on genetics specifically focusing on the merging of different Pokémon species. Do not underestimate these one or two moves. A different starting point can often ignite the deeper talents of Pokémon, unearths greater potential, and may even allow them to break through the limits of their species. What about Thunderbolt? June asked in astonishment. Breaking through the limits of species? Doesn't that mean even Taillow could learn Thunderbolt? If Taillow could learn Thunderbolt, it would completely shatter her worldview. Can genetics really achieve this? Unfortunately, there haven't been any precedents so far. But precisely because of this, it's worth it for me to research and explore. The old man shook his head, but immediately smiled. His way of thinking directly changed Terence's understanding of breeders, making him re-evaluate this profession. Is there a possibility for my Beautifully to inherit moves? Terence asked. Beautifully, ah. So far, no inherited moves have been discovered. It might be due to my lack of research, Master Victor expressed regret. So far, there hasn't been any discovery indicating that Beautifully can learn moves through inheritance that were previously deemed impossible for them to learn. I see. Terence nodded, but he still held some anticipation. Haven't been found doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The unknown is the fundamental reason that drives people crazy. What moves can my Chansey inherit? June eagerly asked. For Chansey, let me think. Aromatherapy, Gravity, Heal Bell, Mud Bomb, and many others. However, your Chansey is specially prepared for newcomers within your family, so it's impossible for it to have inherited moves, Master Victor said. June acknowledged with a sound of agreement, not feeling too disappointed. Perhaps one day, undiscovered inherited moves will be found by all of you, the old man said with a smile, clearly having high expectations for the two. Master Victor's words stirred a different emotion within both of them. In which field would they develop? June Joy, would she follow the path of settling in a Pokémon Center like everyone else in her family? Would her lifelong work be healing injured Pokémon for trainers? As for Terence, he had even more thoughts. He initially chose to become a breeder solely based on the benefits it offered. However, after listening to the detailed explanation from a top-tier breeder, it seemed that being a breeder was like a jack of all trades, where one couldn't go wrong no matter what they did. Breeders could ensure the healthy and optimal growth of Pokémon, train them in utilizing powerful moves, and enhance their beauty. What difference was there between that and being a coordinator? Not only that, even exceptional trainers probably didn't have the ability to teach dozens of moves to a single Pokémon. With numerous moves, wouldn't the tactical choices in battles become more perfect? Moreover, breeding a special Pokémon that possesses moves it was never meant to learn seemed to be a highly challenging task. With these thoughts, Terence realized that breeders were not just about creating some vitamins and taking care of Pokémon. Terence's initial goal was simply to have a stable income through the identity of a breeder. But now, it seemed that being a breeder was not simple at all. The professions of coordinator, trainer, and even professors couldn't do without the foundation of breeders. With the expectations of the entire old greenhouse, Terence had once vowed to take Beautifully to the final stage of a Pokémon contest. Now, he realized that this seemed to be aligned with being a breeder. In fact, becoming an outstanding breeder would make the journey towards being a top coordinator, Elite Four, or even a champion much easier. Thank you, Master Victor. Terence's eyes gradually brightened. His understanding and curiosity towards breeder has become even deeper. Chapter 11, Breeder Headquarters. Arrived at the destination. After a long day of sailing, the SS Title finally docked at Lilycove City. The three of them disembarked together, stepping into the territory of Lilycove City. Master Victor was clearly well prepared. As soon as they got off the ship, there was a private car waiting for them. After spending several months training outside with little June, he was finally returning to his identity as a top-level master. Before long, they arrived in front of the breeder headquarters by car. Is this the breeder headquarters? The building in front of them was grand and magnificent, but Terence had already learned about it through various means. Moreover, with his memories from his past life, it didn't impress him much. Let me take you both to register. After getting down from the car, the old man planned to take the two youngsters to register. The registration process was simple. Victor took Terence and June to the lobby and directed them to the counter to submit their identity information. It was evident that the registration had been going on all day as the staff member looked tired. June Joy, 10 years old, recommendation, Joy family. All right, registration is complete. Slightly surprised, the registration officer returned the Pokédex to June, a little more energetic. 10 years old and from the Joy family. It seems she had encountered an extraordinary genius. Then, Terence handed over his identity information. However, he didn't have the qualification to receive a Pokédex, so he had to provide the most basic proof of identity to the staff member. Name, Terence, age, 10, no referrer. Child, are you serious? The staff member, who was using a computer to handle the registration, felt an unreal feeling in her heart upon seeing Terence's identification information. What's happening today? First, a 10-year-old came to register, but luckily, she is from the Joy family, and a regular here. Although she is a genius, it is still acceptable. But this child, with the most basic proof of identity and no referrer, coupled with being just 10 years old, in this era where 10-year-olds becoming junior breeders is extremely rare, the registration officer almost mistook Terence for a troublemaker. However, her excellent professionalism made her dismiss that thought. If you don't have a referrer or a Pokédex, you'll need to pay a fee of 1,000 yen. Immediately after, the registration officer delivered a piece of news that left Terence completely dumbfounded. I have to pay a fee to participate in the exam. Terence was genuinely unaware. As far as he knew, there didn't seem to be such a requirement. However, the option for a referrer was indeed something he hadn't heard of, which made Terence somewhat convinced. I remember reading Breeder Examination Guide, but it didn't have any mention of a fee for the breeder examination, right? Terence voiced his doubts. Even though he knew it was unlikely for the officer to deceive him, Terence didn't have enough money. If he couldn't participate in the breeder examination, there was no point in discussing anything further. The registration officer was also a bit surprised, but she patiently explained, perhaps you read the outdated version. I recall there are registration-related notices posted in the lobby. You can go and have a look. Upon hearing this, Terence completely believed her. There was no reason for her to deceive him. Can you make an exception? At this moment, June behind Terence spoke up. You know each other. The registration officer was somewhat surprised to see June Joy's actions. She hadn't expected that these two kids would be together. I believe he has the ability to become a junior breeder. Little June nodded in agreement. Upon hearing June Joy's words, the registration officer was somewhat taken aback, but she still said, however, rules are rules. If I were to alter them, I could be fined. But considering your young age, I'll help you this once and register you. A thought crossed the registration officer's mind. She naturally couldn't go against the regulations of the breeder headquarters, but if she personally paid 1,000 yen for Terence's registration, then there wouldn't be any issues. As for whether it was worth it or not, if Terence truly had the skills to become a breeder at the age of 10, what could be more attractive to her than that? For her, it was an investment and a favor to someone. A young breeder with great potential was worthy of her assistance. Thank you so much. June let out a sigh of relief. She had also noticed Terence's predicament. The current outcome was undoubtedly the best. Thank you. Terence also expressed his gratitude to little June. At his age, he didn't really care about feeling embarrassed or not. If he could avoid spending money on the examination, then why would he go looking for trouble? Just as the registration officer was preparing to proceed with the registration, Master Victor walked over from a distance. He had noticed that Terence hadn't registered yet, so it caught his attention. You don't need to trouble yourself. Fill in my name as his referrer. As soon as he arrived, the old man understood the situation and handed a card to the registration officer. Even before seeing the person, the registration officer was slightly surprised upon hearing these words. Except for some high-level families within the breeder headquarters, only intermediate breeders and above had the qualification to recommend someone. It seemed that this child wasn't without any background. Of course, otherwise how could a 10-year-old have the confidence to participate in the junior breeder examination and be familiar with someone from the Joy family? You are Master Victor. The registration officer, who was initially just slightly surprised, exclaimed after inserting the card into the slot, as the information displayed on the computer screen immediately caught her attention. The photo, name, identity, and achievements displayed left her in awe. Honorary Vice President of the Breeder Association, Top-Level Breeder, Genetics Master, Vice Dean of the Crown Academy, and many more. Master Victor also has the honor of participating in various competitions during his youth. All of this made the registration officer extremely excited. Hello, Master Victor. The registration officer immediately stood up and bowed to Victor, showing her respect. If it weren't for the late hour and the fact that they were the only ones left to register, her exclamation would likely have attracted many others. The influence of a top-level breeder was equivalent to the attraction of Elite Four or even the champion to ordinary trainers. Don't worry about all that. Just proceed with the registration. Victor chuckled and waved his hand. All right. Upon hearing Victor's instruction, the registration officer worked diligently, being extremely careful during the process, fearing making any mistakes. The process was very fast, and once the registration was completed, after returning the information credentials, the lady in charge of registration continued, wishing you both good results, and good luck. Thank you. The two of them politely responded without much excitement. They both had full confidence and didn't need to make themselves overly nervous or excited. Observing the calm expressions of the two kids, the registration officer couldn't help but feel a slight admiration. Sure enough, how could they be ordinary when they have a connection with Master Victor? It seems that this examination would be quite interesting. Chapter 12, Young Examinees. Breeder Headquarters, Building 1, 2nd floor, Room 203. It was the location of Terence and the others' exam. Terence and others had spent a night resting at the hotel and were feeling quite refreshed. Moreover, they had a lavish meal that Master Victor had pre-booked, and Terence considered himself lucky to have this opportunity. It was the first time since he set out that he had such delicious food. The exam was scheduled for 8 o'clock in the morning, and there was still half an hour left, but people had already started to arrive one after another. Most of the people coming for the junior breeder exam were teenagers, but it wasn't an absolute rule. If you walk past a few more rooms, you might even see some older individuals who had come for the exam. It's not that their comprehension is poor, it was just that they had started learning the relevant knowledge at different times. Terence has a significant advantage, possessing mature thinking, and he had been exposed to breeders' knowledge since he was young, giving him a head start. However, grasping all the tedious and intricate knowledge with the thinking and comprehension abilities of a child was really difficult. That was also why adults were generally better at comprehending things than children. Terence's situation was hard to replicate. Even June, who has a good family background and was taught by a famous master, was participating in the exam at the same age as Terence. 203. Terence and little June looked up at the door number and walked in with their examination information. Only the examinees were allowed to enter here, so after Master Victor dropped off Terence and June downstairs, he went back alone to wait. He was confident that Terence and June would successfully pass the exam, but what he was looking forward to was how they would rank among the other examinees. At this moment, there were already quite a few people sitting in the classroom, probably around 10, and after calmly scanning the room, Terence and June found their seats and sat down. As time passed, more and more examinees entered the room. By the final 10 minutes before the exam, almost every seat had been occupied. At the podium stood a woman who appeared to be in her early 20s, writing the exam time 8:009:30 on the blackboard. She was the invigilator for this exam. I am Beljoy, your exam invigilator. Terence was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected a Joy to be the invigilator, as she was from the same family as little June. However, the Joy family was widespread, so there might not necessarily be any connection between them. Using the last 10 minutes, Beljoy quieted down the classroom and explained the exam rules in detail. The rules were quite common, and most people who came for the exam understood them to some extent. Moreover, because it was the exam for junior breeder, the difficulty and process were quite simple. Currently, it is the first part of the exam, the written test. As soon as the exam time arrived, the exam papers were handed out. When Terence picked up his paper and glanced at it, he immediately felt it was too easy. These things wouldn't pose a challenge for him. The test paper consisted of 3 pages with a total of 3 major sections: multiple choice, fill in the blanks, and argumentative essay. The total score for the exam paper was 100 points, with the multiple choice section worth 30 points, 10 questions, fill in the blanks section also worth 30 points, 10 questions, and the argumentative essay section consisting of only 2 questions, each worth 20 points. For the first part of the exam, as long as you scored 60 points, you would be able to proceed to the next part. Those who didn't reach 60 points would be considered to have failed the exam. It's just the basics. After carefully skimming over the exam paper, Terence began answering the questions. For example, the first question was about the Pokémon Poochyena. The question assessed the nature of Poochyena, and it could be considered an easy question. There were 4 options for the multiple choice question: A. Stubborn, B. Aggressive, C. Sharp, and D. Timid. Without hesitation, Terence quickly chose option A. All 4 options made some sense, but the most suitable one was option A. Poochyena, this Pokémon, often showed its fierce fangs to intimidate others, but at the same time, it would tuck its tail and run away when faced with retaliation. Also, they have a very keen sense of smell. If you don't have a deep understanding, examinees are likely to get confused as early as the first question. In fact, the most prominent trait of Poochyena is its stubbornness. They would immediately bite anything that moved and would continue the chase until their prey was exhausted. They would persistently pursue fleeing opponents. Once they targeted a prey, they would chase it until it was exhausted. Compared to other traits, this particular aspect stands out significantly. To answer the first question correctly, one must not only have a comprehensive understanding of Poochyena but also be able to distinguish the primary and secondary aspects of their temperament and traits. The second question with an illustration: what is Gyarado's secondary type? A. Water, B. Dragon, C. Dark, D. Flying. Terence swiftly answered the multiple choice questions without any pause. Meanwhile, Belljoy, who was responsible for supervising the exam, surveyed the surroundings. After seeing Terence and June's information, she was also greatly surprised. 10-year-old examinees, and it seemed that one of them was from the same family as her. It was truly remarkable. So, she decided to pay more attention to these 2 young examinees' results after the exam. Meanwhile, Terence immediately shifted his focus to the fill-in-the-blanks questions. If the multiple-choice questions could be guessed correctly, the fill-in-the-blanks questions would put one's knowledge base to the test. The first question, Beldum primarily relies on, to control its movements. At first glance, this might be considered a very simple question. Some might feel lucky and confidently write down takedown or psychic power. However, generally, such surface-level answers tend to be incomplete or incorrect. Beldum's body is magnetized, and it uses magnetic force to move, communicate, and control its attacks. It is said to have a connection with Magnemite, but Beldum's magnetic force primarily focuses on psychic-type moves rather than steel-type moves. In battle, Beldum's capabilities are quite limited, as it can only use takedown when not taught any other moves. Perhaps some have seen the rare Beldum and observed their fighting style closely, then it is not difficult to notice that they only use the move takedown. So naturally, some might confidently fill in takedown for this question. Another approach would be to consider Beldum's types, Steel and Psychic. Steel type is difficult to explain, but Psychic, on the other hand, is naturally associated with the basic means of controlling their own movements. Therefore, very few people can answer magnetic force correctly. These questions are designed to weed out examinees who are trying to take advantage of uncertainty. After writing the word magnetic force, Terence continued with the questions. 1, 2, 3. Terence's accumulated knowledge from his daily efforts effortlessly manifested during the exam. He answered swiftly and with ease. Chapter 13, Exam in Progress. These are all highly niche questions that cannot be underestimated. Breeders need an extremely deep understanding of Pokémons, and merely having surface-level knowledge is far from enough. Perhaps these knowledge may not seem extraordinary at first glance, but they are just the basic skills of a junior breeder. To successfully train a Pokémon or make a living through this means, the effort required is far from simple. In every city or town, Pokémon centers are staffed by Pokémon nurses, commonly known as Nurse Joy. Even for these junior Pokémon nurses, the minimum requirement is to reach the level of an intermediate breeder. The knowledge assessed in the junior breeder examination represents far from everything. Compared to the knowledge of those top masters, these are simply child's play. Next, Terence continued to answer the questions. He swiftly completed the 10 fill-in-the-blank questions without wasting much of his time. In just 20 minutes, Terence had already reached the final 2 argumentative essay questions. The argumentative essay questions required a minimum of 150 words of explanation and are usually relevant to real-life situations and require connecting various knowledge together. Furthermore, they often go beyond the current level of exam, providing examinees with a challenge. The maximum score for each question was 20 points. The examiner would grade based on the examinee's key points. Often, obtaining more than 10 points was considered a good result. The exam paper had questions of varying difficulty, and the final 2 big questions were the key to assessing the examinee's level. Prove attached image. The white area on Azuril's cheeks appears light green and it seems to be in extreme pain. How should this be handled? Upon seeing the first question, even Terence paused and began to organize his thoughts. Argumentative essay questions differ from the previous multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank questions as they require more than just knowledge about a specific Pokémon. The argumentative essay questions in the junior breeder exam include 2 different Pokémon. Fortunately, this is just a written test, and Terence's years of experience in question preparation have made him somewhat familiar with the patterns and strategies for answering them. Terence, like many others, had repeatedly reviewed past exam questions and their explanations, gaining a grasp of the thought process. It was somewhat similar to the examination concepts from his past life. However, a written test was still a written test. If faced with a real situation, whether the breeder could take urgent measures was another matter. Azuril, light green, in pain. After thinking carefully for a few minutes, Terence finally began writing. Starting from the expression and symptoms, if it shows pain, it could be due to an injury or being affected by a status condition such as paralysis, poison, or burn. If Azuril's cheeks are light green, it suggests that some substance has likely altered its physical condition. Or it might have fallen into a status condition. Looking at the light green color in the attached image, at first, Terence couldn't find the corresponding key points. Junior breeder examination does not typically pose overly challenging questions and focuses on testing knowledge of commonly encountered Pokémon. From what Terence recalls, both poison and paralysis condition could cause Azuril pain. Considering Azuril's nature of generally enjoying playing near water and mostly living in forests, Terence could narrow down the target to bug-type and grass-type Pokémons. At the first thought, Wurmple and its evolution line came to Terence's mind. However, after a moment's consideration, he immediately ruled it out. Beautifly's stun spore is brownish-yellow, the poison from bug bite is a mix of brown and purple, and poison sting's poison is deep purple. Dustix is also the same, as its poison causes red-purple symptoms, which don't align with the current situation. As for grass-type Pokémon like Oddish and Shroomish, it seems they don't fit the criteria either. However, after reviewing the habitats and characteristics of other Pokémon, Terence finally focused on Shroomish. Although Shroomish's stun spore and poison powder differ from the symptoms described, it possesses a unique characteristic: its special spores. These released spores are different from poison powder and toxic move. Shroomish tends to value these spores and only releases them in very dangerous situations. These spores also contain a trace of poison, which can ultimately form a unique powder specific to Shroomish. These spores can be used against enemies or to make medicines. They are excellent medicinal materials. Most importantly, Shroomish loves the damp soil of the forest, making it fond of moist places. Thus, with this in mind, his train of thought became clear: Azuril and Shroomish. They are the key to solving this question. Next, this problem is only halfway solved. Knowing the reason, it is still necessary to test the breeder on what actions they would take. People without a clue would probably write something like using an antidote, but the question certainly wouldn't be that easy. Moreover, if the treatment is started without fully understanding the situation, it can often cause secondary harm to the Pokémon. Terence wrote the following answer: first, make Azuril stop moving. Then, gently squeeze its tail until Marilou's cheeks turn dark green. After that, it is best to use a Pecha berry or Kabia berry as the optimal method for detoxification. The next option would be using an antidote. However, if there is no antidote available, Azurill should conserve its energy as much as possible, avoid using powerful moves, and find a detoxifying medicine as soon as possible. After detoxification, Azurill should release its energy freely until it becomes exhausted. This is the safest approach. Azurill's large, round tail stores enough nutrients for its growth. After being poisoned, poison immediately invades its tail, infecting the stored nutrients. To prevent the poison from penetrating deeper and hindering Azurill's future growth, it needs to stop moving its tail first, allowing the poison to remain in a relaxed state. Then, massage the tail, utilizing its special elasticity to push most of the foreign poison towards the cheeks. This is the first and most effective point of action for the antidote, where it can be applied. Next, the process is not yet complete. At this point, not all poison has been eliminated. Although Azurill is no longer in any immediate danger, as a precautionary measure, it should continuously use powerful moves to consume energy and release any poison that has invaded its energy. Only by doing so can we consider the problem to be solved perfectly. Certainly, each type of poison and different Pokémon species require different methods to resolve the situation. This is precisely the challenge that tests breeders' abilities. After writing these explanations in a more rigorous manner, Terence breathed a sigh of relief. Clearly, solving such a complex question had also strained his mind. Without wasting any time, Terence immediately looked at the second question. How to teach a Meowth the following moves. Please select one to answer. Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, Dark Pulse, Double Team, Water Pulse. This is another type of question, concerning the training of Pokémon moves. Similarly, it is a fundamental skill shared by both breeders and trainers. Chapter 14, Result is announced. Terence understood that choosing different moves to answer, if the explanation process is the same, choosing Shadow Ball would undoubtedly score higher than Double Team. However, after thinking about it carefully, Terence ultimately chose Thunderbolt, a move he believed had a good chance of success but wouldn't be too easy. One by one, he wrote down all the answers he could think of until 45 minutes had passed, which was half of the allotted time, and he had already completed all the questions. After checking everything again for 5 minutes to ensure there were no mistakes, Terence looked up. At the same time, little June also raised her head. Clearly, they had both finished. They exchanged a smile before raising their hands together. Since they had completed the exam and were confident in their answers, they decided to submit their papers early. And so, amidst the astonished and doubtful gazes of others, Terence and little June left the exam room 303. The exam was supposed to last 90 minutes, but only 50 minutes had passed. The other examinees were astonished by Terence and little June's speed in answering the questions. Of course, there were some who were doubtful and found it hard to believe as they both looked too young. Belljoy, who was responsible for supervising the exam, returned to the stage after collecting the papers and carefully flipped through their answer sheets. She smiled, showing some curiosity. Is it done? The speed at which the two of them answered was within Master Victor's expectations, so seeing them finish early didn't come as a big surprise. It was quite easy. Terence and little June both replied in this way. What do you think your scores will be? How about we make a bet? If both of you rank in the top 5 among this year's examinees, I'll give each of you a special reward. If you don't achieve it, well, then there won't be any reward. Whether it was a joke or a serious proposal, Master Victor said with a smile. A reward? As a reward from a top-level breeder, Terence knew without a doubt that it would be something good. And even if they didn't meet the conditions set by the Master, it didn't seem like there would be any loss. Terence wasn't sure about the overall performance of this year's examinees, but the exam result wouldn't be about the age. If Terence were to say who would definitely come first, that would be impossible to say for sure. At least when facing June in front of him, Terence didn't have the confidence that his grades would surpass her. Although the answering process went smoothly, who knew if there were any loopholes in his supposedly correct answers? Moreover, even for the argumentative essay questions he was confident about, it was impossible to get a perfect score. We accept the bet. Both little June and Terence had no reason to refuse Master Victor's bet, and even Master Victor himself seemed to be planning to give them the rewards. Very well, I'm looking forward to the results of your next exam. The passing score for the first stage of the exam was 60 points, with a maximum of 100 examinees allowed to pass. If the number exceeded 100, the lowest scores would be eliminated until the count reached 100. Then, the second stage of the exam would follow. As for the number of people who would ultimately pass the junior breeder's exam, it was usually around 10 each year. Sometimes it could be a bit more than 10, but sometimes it could also be as few as 4 or 5. However, Terence and the others didn't appear as nervous as the other examinees. The exam would conclude at 9:30, and the grading process would continue until the afternoon. At 2 p.m., all the results would be announced, followed by the announcement of the next subject of the exam by the invigilators. Several hours passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, Terence and the others didn't go anywhere and stayed in the room, discussing the written exam's questions. After listening to Master Victor's explanation of certain questions, Terence came to realize that there are always people who excel beyond expectations. Some of the answers he thought were correct turned out to have loopholes, and there were traps hidden everywhere within the questions. In the subsequent argumentative essay questions, Victor meticulously helped analyze them for both little June and Terence. It was an immensely satisfying experience for the two of them. The top-notch master truly lived up to his reputation with his rigorous thinking and interconnected reasoning. The analysis was captivating, and Terence was completely engrossed, wishing to listen to more similar argumentative essay questions. "Oh, the results will be out soon. Let's go together and check the announcement," Master Victor said, glancing at the time. "Sure, let's go." June smiled and stood up, then walked out of the room. Terence was also looking forward to it. He has roughly calculated his own score and wanted to verify if there were any differences. After hearing Master Victor's explanation, he realized his own shortcomings in several questions due to his limited knowledge, especially compared to little June. On the other hand, other examinees were discussing among themselves, saying, "I wonder who will be the top scorer in the written exam." Usually, the top 5 in the written exam are almost guaranteed to pass the exam, right? Probably, unless something unexpected happens. I think I did pretty well. I hope I pass the written exam because the second practical round is my strong suit. As they conversed, most of the examinees and their families gathered in front of the large screen where the results would be announced. The square was spacious enough to accommodate a significant number of people, so overcrowding wasn't a concern. Judging from the number of examinees in this exam alone, the square had more than enough space to accommodate them all comfortably. "Quick! Look! I'm 46th, it's me. This is the first time I passed the written exam. It seems like I'm getting closer to becoming a junior breeder. I see myself. 75 points. I'm at 15th place. That's me. 10th place. 78 points." Everyone looked at the electronic screen as the names and scores of examinees flashed one by one, starting from the 88th position. The maximum number of examinees to pass the first round of the written exam was 100. If there were less than 100, they would be considered pass if they scored above the minimum passing grade of 60. Clearly, the number of examinees who reached the passing score was less than 100. Among the hundreds of examinees, only dozens stood out. Although they hadn't reached the level of a junior breeder yet, their knowledge surpassed most trainers. Being a breeder was indeed a unique profession. Terence and June didn't pay much attention to the joy or sorrow of the other examinees around them. They stared at the screen intently, afraid of missing their own names. The display was currently showing the 10th place, and their name had not appeared yet. This naturally meant that both of them had ranked in the top 10. As for the specifics, they had to continue watching. 9th, 8th, 7th, until the 6th place, when their names still hadn't appeared, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. At least they had won half of the bet with Master Victor. Next, the 5th place also didn't have their names either, then the 4th place. Finally, Terence's name appeared on the big screen, 4th place with 85 points, an excellent result. Following that, the 3rd place with 86 points was announced, and at the same time, a young man in his 20s jumped up with joy. 2nd place went to June Joy with 88 points, but the 1st place score was a whopping 10 points higher than little June's, 98 points, Wallace. Chapter 15, Wallace. Obviously, this score shocked Terence and June. With a score of 98, it was close to a perfect score. Perhaps he only lost points in the argumentative essay questions due to minor flaws, which were so small that they could almost be ignored. Especially when they saw the other's age. A green-haired boy in a sailor suit, looking about 15 or 16 years old. At this moment, he had his hand elegantly placed behind his back and wore a smile as he bowed to everyone. At the same time, he said, "It's an honor." "Is that Wallace?" Terrence's mind surged with thoughts as he glanced at Wallace, who was also quite young. He felt a sense of familiarity from him, as if Wallace was an important character in the original work, but he couldn't quite remember. On the other hand, June seemed a bit disappointed. Ha ha ha, don't mind. When you reach that age, you might even become intermediate breeders, Victor said uncaringly as he ruffled little June's hair. In his view, little June and Terrence's talent wouldn't lose its value just because there was a significant difference between them in the first place. And that young man is not ordinary either. Master Victor looked at the bowing boy, lost in thought. Teacher, do you know him? Little June looked up. I know him vaguely. Wallace, he is the gym trainer of the official gym of the Sootopolis City, the Sootopolis Gym. He recently took over the gym from his mentor, Juan. He's an impressive young man. His mentor, Juan, specializes in water-type Pokémon and is also a remarkable coordinator. So, Wallace has exceptional talent in both coordinating and water-type Pokémon. He's even known as a rising star closest to the elites. Victor thought for a moment before telling the two children. He is a gym trainer and a coordinator. So, breeding isn't his primary profession. Victor's words left Terrence dumbfounded, and his expression became somewhat strange. He's also a coordinator, interesting. Terrence looked at Wallace's elegant figure. Although surprised, he didn't have an attitude of reverence. Regardless of breeding skills or coordination abilities, Wallace in front of him intrigued Terrence. He seemed like a great target to chase after. Are you feeling pressured? Master Victor chuckled and asked. Closest to the elites, how amazing. Little June's attention was focused on this word. She knew very well what elites represented. The so-called elites, also known as the Elite Four, are the four strongest trainers of each region's Pokémon League. In theory, their strength is second only to the league champion. However, in reality, there are many trainers who possess strength not inferior to those of the Elite Four. Nevertheless, the Elite Four stationed in various regional leagues undoubtedly have their own unique characteristics. Each elite is considered a top-tier combatant in the Pokémon League, a prominent figure in society. It would be effortless for an Elite Four member to support and uplift an entire town, let alone a small orphanage like Old Greenhouse. And for Wallace, at the age of 15 or 16, to be recognized as close to becoming an elite, his exceptional talent was self-evident. Perhaps being a breeder was merely a supporting role for him. He's really amazing. If you want to surpass him, you have to work hard. June, born into a prominent family, has a better understanding of the Elite Four and their capabilities compared to Terrence. Naturally. Terrence smiled. He had a feeling that this Wallace would become a formidable opponent, even the biggest threat, in his quest to dominate Pokémon contests. Especially since the other person was likely an important character from the original work, he had to take him seriously. Terrence regretted a bit why he hadn't taken the time to remember the classics of his childhood, causing him to forget many plot details completely. Look, they've announced the topic for the second exam. Someone pointed at the screen. After the rankings were announced, the topic for the second exam appeared. As usual, the second exam was usually a practical one, with only one topic and graded on a 100-mark system. Those who pass the written test in the first stage generally do not perform poorly in the second stage. However, to officially pass the junior breeder exam, they needed to achieve a score of 85 in the second exam. Topic: Emergency Rescue. Are you ready to wait here, or? Master Victor asked. The second exam would take place an hour later, and the duration would depend on the difficulty of the topic. Normally, it wouldn't exceed an hour, but if it involved an emergency rescue, it might be even shorter. We'll wait here, Terrence replied. He didn't have much to prepare for the second exam. With such a short amount of time, what could he do? Besides, he didn't believe that an emergency rescue would pose a challenge for him. June nodded in agreement. In that case, I'll go back and wait for the good news. Master Victor smiled and bid farewell to the two, turned around and headed back to wait. The result of the exam would be announced immediately after the second exam, so the junior breeder exam would be completed within a day. Look, the ones who passed are already heading that way. June tugged on Terrence's sleeve and pointed towards the crowd. Let's go over there too, Terrence said in response. Soon, the two made their way through the crowd and joined the group of those who passed. Clearly, this was the place where they will first receive the news of their successful performance in the second exam. That's why most of the people who had passed were gathering here. At this moment, the past examinees were surrounding Wallace, praising him. Scoring nearly a perfect 98, it was truly remarkable. In previous exams, there were very few people who managed to score 90 or above. I was just lucky. Calmly responding to people's praise, Wallace seemed to be used to it. His behavior seems to be a bit strange, someone commented. However, immediately he was met with rebuttal from others. What do you know? Sir Wallace is known as the rising star among coordinators. He is a talented coordinator who embodies both beauty and grace. Some people knew Wallace's background and started revealing information. He's quite popular. Little June wasn't too surprised when she saw this scene. Yet, Terence agreed. Suddenly, he noticed that Wallace seemed to be looking in their direction, and then he started walking towards them. You must be Miss June Joy and Mr. Terence, Wallace greeted with a polite bow and asked with a smile. Wallace's sudden greeting caught Terence and June off guard, but they politely replied. June's distinctive features, combined with them being the youngest here, made it easy to recognize them. Wallace clearly had done some investigation on them. I heard that there were 2 young examinees, but I didn't expect it to be true. Wallace looked at the 2 youngsters in astonishment. He was also very surprised by their scores. Even with all the halo surrounding Wallace, it was undeniable that being a 10-year-old junior breeder was quite extraordinary. Chapter 16, Group of Oddish. After exchanging a few words, Terence and the others gained a preliminary understanding of Wallace's personality. From Wallace's mouth, Terence also learned the reason why he came to the breeder exam. Wallace listened to his friend's advice, hoping to increase his own strength through breeder training. My friend, he is an intermediate breeder, but he has exceptional talent in the trainer field. Terence understood. It seemed that not only he had realized it, but many talented trainers and coordinators had also recognized the importance of breeder knowledge and used it to enrich their own skills. The people who have passed the first exam, please gather at the second exam's assigned spot immediately. The message was repeated 3 times, while also informing them of the location of the second exam. They exchanged glances and ceased their conversation, making their way to the second exam's location. Wallace, June Joy, and Terence walked together, drawing a lot of attention. The invigilators who were silently observing them from the background couldn't help but look forward to these 3 prodigies' next exam. The location for the second exam was a large courtyard behind the headquarters. The order was still being supervised by the invigilators from the first written test. Once everyone had arrived, a middle-aged man announced the topic for the second exam, emergency rescue. You are already familiar with it, but for the specific details, please take a look here. As the man spoke, a group of green Pokémon emerged in full view of the examinees. This is Oddish, someone exclaimed in surprise upon seeing these Pokémon. Oh my, there are probably close to 100 Oddish. Someone counted the number of Oddish and found it somewhat unbelievable. Are they the topic of our second exam? Most people voiced their doubts upon seeing this scene. Their guesses were not far off. The middle-aged man in charge of the entire exam nodded and said, That's right. Your second exam is related to this group of Oddish. Upon hearing this, Terence and the others glanced slightly, observing these Oddish. They are ordinary Oddish. After observing for a moment, they arrived at this conclusion. Seeing the confusion among the crowd, the man continued, There are a total of 88 Oddish here. Next, each of you will be assigned 1, and at the same time, you will be given a special medicine prepared by a senior breeder specifically for this exam. This potion can simulate burn injuries caused by a move. After administering this medicine to the Oddish, you will have 15 minutes to treat their injuries using the materials we provide. If it exceeds 20 minutes, the burns on the Oddish will worsen. Therefore, you only have 15 minutes. If you cannot resolve it within that time, you will be considered disqualified. At the same time, the invigilators will grade you based on the different effects and time it takes to resolve the burn injury. Those who score 85 points or above will pass this exam and obtain the Junior Breeder's certification. The entire crowd erupted in astonishment. No one expected the emergency rescue to unfold in this manner. It was the first time in history that such a format had been used. 88 Oddish and 88 bottles of medicines prepared by a senior breeder. It seemed that the breeder headquarters is truly being extravagant this time. Do you have any more questions? After a moment of silence, no one made a sound. However, it was evident that each of them had already begun extracting necessary information from the man's words. Oddish, burn. These details were not overlooked by the examinees present. Those who were able to pass the first round of exam were not ordinary individuals who would simply go with the flow. The pass rate for junior breeders was lower compared to advancing to intermediate or even senior breeder. This was a fundamental issue. As long as the basics were solid, except for the level of a top-tier master, one could progress through extensive research over time. And those who can become junior breeders are the cream of the crop, selected based on their exceptional talents. Currently, there are only over 10,000 registered breeders in the league. And the population of the Hone region alone is in the several millions. So this is the topic of the exam. After listening to the middle-aged man, Terence was eager to give it a try. He also wanted to test himself and see how far he could go in this situation. It seems like both of you are very confident. June smiled and looked at Terence and Wallace, noticing that they weren't showing any signs of nervousness. Of course, as a coordinator, one must always maintain a calm mindset and demeanor. Wallace said. Let's go pick an oddish and receive the medicine. Terence looked at the other examinees who had already started moving and said to the two of them. All right, let's go. June shouted. 88 oddish, each one not much different from the others. These oddish should have been raised by the breeder headquarters. After all, their pollen and the saliva of the evolved gloom are highly valuable materials. Please take care of it. After receiving the medicine, Terence took an oddish with him. The oddish also knew its mission, and fortunately, with the medicine prepared by the senior breeder, the burn effect wouldn't cause significant harm to the oddish in a short period. This provided ample time for the examinees. Bringing the oddish back to his spot, Terence saw all the materials that he could use. There were about 20 different kinds. Of course, it was impossible to use them all. As for how to combine them and bring out the best effects, it would depend on the examinees' choices. When everyone was ready, the middle-aged man reiterated the rules and warned the examinees not to haphazardly mix medicines due to time constraints, unless they had enough confidence. Otherwise, they would face a lifetime ban from future exams. Finally, the exam began, and the large clock with a 15-minute countdown started swinging. As the ticking of the clock began, Terence, like all the other examinees, first spoke to the oddish and, once the oddish confirmed its readiness, he quickly applied the medicine to the oddish's leaves. Next, he had to make the medicine based on the oddish's condition. There are many different causes of burns, and different burns require different treatment methods to achieve better results. However, it doesn't mean that other healing items for burns have no effect. The most well-known one is Burn Heal, which is almost a universal medicine. Although its effect may not be the best, it can be used for all known burns. First, he smelled the scent of the medicine, and then he looked at the oddish. Oddish, how do you feel? Half a minute passed. Terence paused and started asking about Oddish's condition. Oddish. Although the oddish wanted to cooperate with Terence to the best of its ability, Terence found it difficult to understand what the oddish was trying to express. He had no choice but to observe the subtle cues it was giving. First, Terence looked at Oddish's expression, the changes in leaf color, the known main ingredients of the medicine, and the time it took for the burn reaction to occur. He recalled his knowledge of pharmacology while methodically deducing the situation. Tien, I will be picking up this Pokémon fanfic. The strongest legend of Dragon Ball will be finished by this month. If you people have any suggestion for good fanfic that you want me to pick, you can tell me on Discord or in the comment section. Chapter 17, Perfect Score. The ingredients of the medicine, Terence had already deduced most of them, and there should be no mistake. Terence also recognized all 20 different berry materials before him. For Terence, this had already solved more than half of the problem. This exam was no longer difficult for him. Next, he just needed to analyze Oddish's burn. Different Pokémon, different moves, different environments, and even different berries could potentially cause Oddish to experience a burn. Understanding Oddish's true condition would greatly guide the direction of treatment. Resolving it doesn't mean it would be perfect. Terence wanted to solve it as perfectly as possible. In other words, he was aiming for a perfect score. There's some meaning to it, but I shouldn't be wrong. Terence murmured, his thoughts rapidly racing. Then, a bright light gleamed in his eyes. At this moment, without hesitation, he picked up a red berry with his right hand and directly peeled its skin using a small knife placed beside him. It looks like he has found a solution. Wallace on the other side didn't rush to take action, as if he was already sure of his victory. This was typical of his character, as he preferred to handle everything with a touch of elegance and grace. In fact, at this point, all the examinees had already started moving. Most of them had found a solution to follow. Even though there were some differences, they all had methods to relieve the burn. As for whose method was more effective, that would be judged by the final exam results. Silence enveloped the surroundings, with only the examinee bustling about in a flurry. Berry, leafage, medicinal herbs, and pollen, various different things were being combined under their hands. Can you guess how many people will pass the exam this time? Meanwhile, the invigilators were gathered together, discussing this batch of examinees. Probably 7 or 8, someone said. I'm more interested in the scores of those 2 individuals. It was Belljoy who spoke, the person in charge of invigilating Terence and the others during the first exam. Oh, those 2 youngsters are indeed remarkable, but I have higher expectations for Wallace. All 3 of them are remarkable. If I'm not mistaken, the top 3 positions this time are most likely going to be taken by them. Finally, the person in charge spoke. That brat named Terence is said to have been recommended by Master Victor to participate in the exam, and June Joy is even Master Victor's student. These words immediately startled the invigilators, who were unaware of this. So that's how it is. No wonder someone so young has such outstanding skills. It turns out he's connected to Master Victor. The invigilators observed the examinees as time slowly passed. Soon, more than half of the time had already passed. It's almost finished. Terence held a wooden stick, grinding away. He was familiar with all the herbs on the tables. This feeling filled Terence with deep emotion. He believed that the combination of his pharmacological knowledge was already perfect. It seems there is benefit to reading so many books after all. Terence shook his head, his hands moving even faster. Time passed, and for Terence, he didn't feel the slightest bit of difficulty. On the contrary, his actions flowed smoothly, and finally, with a snap, he stopped. It was done. Looking at the blue paste-like substance in front of him, although it wasn't aesthetically pleasing, Terence was confident that it would greatly help with Oddish's burn. Taking a deep breath, Terence applied the blue ointment on Oddish and raised his hand. That brat is done. Terence wasn't the first to finish, but he wasn't slow either. There was no need to wait for the exam time to end, the invigilator could immediately check the completed work. As invigilators, they were fully aware of the topic of this exam. Being able to supervise meant their own level was at least an intermediate breeder. The knowledge involved in the junior breeder exam couldn't possibly pose a challenge to them. Let me take a look. Belljoy, who had been watching June and Terence all along, walked over and began to help Terence with the inspection. At this moment, approximately 10 minutes had passed. Seeing Belljoy approach, Terence also stepped aside, and then Belljoy picked up the Oddish, observing its condition. Not long after, she put down the Oddish and gave Terence a deep look. Congratulations, you did well, she said with a smile, clearly satisfied with Terence's performance. Does that mean I passed? Terence asked. Not yet. The remaining ointment you made still needs to be inspected by other invigilators. I just conducted the initial examination to ensure there are no unexpected issues with Oddish, she smiled and said. The final results will be announced after everyone has finished. I understand, Terence nodded and looked around. At this moment, June had also finished, and Wallace had finished even earlier than him. Over 10 minutes had passed, and now they had reached the final stage of the exam. With nothing else to do, Terence began to wait quietly. A few minutes passed quickly, and the exam was over. The other examinees anxiously awaited the results, but Terence and others were quite relaxed. Walking towards June, Terence could hear the discussions among the examinees. Some of their reasoning seemed well-founded and rigorous, but he also caught snippets of bizarre answers. For example, it could be burn caused by will-o-wisp or flame-induced injuries. It must be a burn caused by intense sunlight, right? Little June couldn't wait to share her inference as she met with Terence. That's right, Terence's answer was the same. The burn caused by the medicine on Oddish was at least 99% similar to Sunny Day. Hearing that Terence had the same answer, June breathed a sigh of relief. Although she was confident, she still wanted to confirm it with Terence. It seems like you both did well. Wallace also walked over at this time, smiling at the two. The 3 of them smiled at each other. With their scores in the written test, the second round of the exam posed no significant challenges. Now, they just had to wait for the final results to be announced. The invigilators' review process was also fast, not keeping them waiting for long. The middle-aged person in charge came over with a list in hand. Next, let me announce who passed this exam. A total of 10 people, they are: Wallace, 100 points. June Joy, 100 points. Terence, 100 points. As 10 names were called out, from highest to lowest, there was even one with 98 points, and the lowest score was 87. The rest, all below 85, were disqualified. Perfect score. Terence breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the results. This meant he was now officially a breeder. 4 years of hard work had finally paid off. He wanted to share the good news with everyone at the old greenhouse, but now was not the best time. Being a junior breeder was not enough, it was just the beginning. Terence knew he still had a long road ahead. He aims to advance to intermediate, even senior, and perhaps even pursue the coveted title of a top-level master. TN, I will be picking up this Pokémon fanfic. The strongest legend of Dragon Ball will be finished by this month. If you people have any suggestion for good fanfic that you want me to pick, you can tell me on Discord or in the comment section. Chapter 18, Choice. Congratulations, all 10 of you. Amidst the grand announcement, symbolizing the perfect conclusion of this exam, the certificates were being presented by the officials from the breeder headquarters to the 10 individuals who had passed the exam, and the first one to receive it was Wallace, who had achieved the highest overall score. The exam had ended, and at exactly 5 p.m., the results were immediately disseminated. The certificate award ceremony would take place at this time. Junior Breeder's Certificate. The sky blue booklet symbolized the breeder's identity, and Terence finally obtained it. He received it with both hands. Opening the certificate, he saw his own photo was pasted on it, followed by his name Terence and the date and age at which he passed the exam. At this moment, the cameras below the stage snapped away, capturing every moment. Whether it was the two 10-year-old breeders or Wallace, they were all hot topics that couldn't be missed. However, in the end, the deeds of June and Wallace were made public, drawing admiration from many people. But Terence's information seemed to have been wiped away, as if erased by someone. Hee, well done. Master Victor looked at the two little ones with a smile, finding their achievements impressive even from his perspective. Master, you haven't forgotten about the reward you mentioned, right? Both of us secured the second and third positions. Not only Terence but even June couldn't forget about the rewards that Master Victor had mentioned. Of course, I wouldn't lie about that. However, I need to carefully prepare it for you both, Master Victor quickly responded with a chuckle. Terence felt a sense of anticipation, wondering what he would receive. Looking back now, he felt fortunate to have encountered little June and Master Victor. Otherwise, he might have found it difficult to even participate in the exam. It seems luck also plays a significant role. News of Wallace and June Joy becoming breeders quickly spread and caused a stir in the community. Wallace was already a public figure in the Hone region, and now his strong entry into the breeder world raised questions about the reason behind his decision. Observers with keen interest immediately began paying attention to this youngster. June Joy, on the other hand, becoming a breeder at the tender age of 10, was an extraordinary achievement rarely seen in recent years. However, under the halo of the Joy family and Master Victor, it didn't cause too much shock. Along with praise, there was a sense of expectation and anticipation for her future accomplishments, which was considered somewhat natural given her background. Even so, June Joy's achievements at such a young age are considered among the top in the Joy family. Terence also saw the news reports where Wallace and June dominated the headlines, while he and the other participants were only briefly mentioned, with their names even missing. Although he didn't know the reason, Terence didn't mind. Even if his age could be heavily publicized, he couldn't become successful overnight. At best, he would receive more attention from some influential figures. But right now, an influential figure was right by his side. Why bother caring about anything else? Master Victor, did you call for me? Terence respectfully asked the old man before him. Ah, Terence, yes, I called you because of yesterday's matter, Master Victor smiled. Yesterday's matter? Do you mean the reward? Terence asked eagerly. That's right, since I promised to give you kids some reward, I won't go back on my word. Master Victor sat down, not displaying any airs or formality, just like when Terence first met him. Under Master Victor's request, Terence took a seat as well. What about June? Terence asked. If there were promised rewards, she should also receive something, right? As for her, her situation is different from yours, so naturally, the rewards will be different too, Master Victor smiled, answering Terence's question. Upon hearing this, Terence refrained from saying more. Terence, are you an orphan? After a moment of silence, Master Victor suddenly spoke up. Terence was taken aback by the question. How did Master Victor know? Had he investigated him? Given Master Victor's status, it wouldn't be difficult for him to find out. It was the truth, and Terence saw no reason to hide it, so he nodded in acknowledgement. You come from a much less privileged background compared to little June. Have you thought about your future? Seeing Terence nod, Master Victor continued. Future. Terence had his own goals, but he was indeed uncertain about how to achieve them. He had already become a junior breeder, but what came next? Should he continue striving to pass the exams and become a coordinator? And how much time would he have to invest to achieve that? Yes, become a top-notch coordinator, or even, become a top-level breeder together with it, Terence replied after some contemplation. Master Victor was momentarily stunned. He had anticipated Terence's answer and had envisioned them to be top-level breeder, coordinator, and even trainer, but Terence's words gave him a sense of arrogance. Each of the professions you mentioned is not easily attainable. It would be a remarkable accomplishment for a person to achieve even one of them in their lifetime, the old man said sincerely and earnestly. Shaking his head, Terence responded, but I still want to persist in it. Becoming a top-notch coordinator was his and the children of Old Greenhouse's dream. Becoming a top-level breeder was the promise he made to himself to support the future of the Old Greenhouse. He is determined to become a top-tier breeder, earn lots and lots of money, to ensure a bright future for everyone. Although seemingly conflicting, each profession embodied Terence's personal ideals. But, do you truly believe you can reach that level? Becoming a breeder at the age of 10 is impressive, but it's just being a junior breeder. Perhaps, after your efforts, you can become an intermediate or senior breeder with rich knowledge and experience. But how long would that take? Each of your goals requires undivided attention and effort. Master Victor's words struck a chord within Terence. Junior breeder's knowledge was relatively easy, but once he reached the intermediate or senior breeder, the knowledge and experience required will go beyond what can be learned from books available on the market. With his background, obtaining it would require tremendous effort. It took him 4 years to achieve the rank of junior breeder, and during that time, he wasted much of it searching for books. Would he then continue to progress as smoothly in the future? Becoming a top-notch coordinator or even a formidable trainer was not something he could achieve by merely speaking. Finally, Terence looked at Master Victor, eager to hear what he had to say. So, I want to give you an opportunity, but it won't be without cost, Master Victor said. Here are 2 choices, consider them as your rewards. Master Victor has high expectations for Terence, but he didn't want him to have a smooth journey. Only after going through hardships could a raw gem shine brilliantly. Thus, he decided to let Terence make his own choice. Tien, I will be picking up this Pokémon fanfic. The strongest legend of Dragon Ball will be finished by this month. If you people have any suggestion for good fanfic that you want me to pick, you can tell me on Discord or in the comment section. Chapter 19, Crown Academy. 2 choices. The first one, I can help you register for the trainer qualification and get you a beginner Pokémon with excellent aptitude issued by the Pokémon League. Trainer qualification costs 100,000 yen, and as for the beginner Pokémon, it's another 100,000 yen. 200,000 yen is a significant expense for Old Greenhouse, which is why Grandma Arlen doesn't have the means to support a child becoming a trainer. The more than 2,000 yen that Terence brought out is what he had saved up over the past 4 years. Therefore, Master Victor's first choice for Terence will provide him with tremendous help, not only solving his problem of where to live but also obtaining the identity of a trainer. This means he can enjoy discounted meals at the Pokémon Center and many other significant benefits. What about the second choice? Terence didn't rush to make a decision. The second choice, well, it's giving you a chance to enter Crown Academy, Master Victor said calmly. Crown Academy? What is that? Hearing this unusual term, Terence found it to be unfamiliar. However, Master Victor patiently explained it to Terence. Crown Academy is a renowned academy in the Sinnoh region, referred to as one of the 3 cradles of geniuses alongside Kanto region's Champion Academy and Johto region's Silver Academy. The achievements of every graduate of the academy are no less impressive than those of the top 3 contestants in a regional conference. However, this is only the average level. But the graduation requirements at Crown Academy are also very difficult. It's not something an ordinary person can achieve. Similarly, the admission requirements for Crown Academy are even more stringent. Unless you have high talent and excellent background, if you want to use money to secure an admission qualification, you'll need 1,000,000 yen. Crown, Silver, and Champion, the three major academies. Master Victor's words once again taught Terence a lesson. He never expected that there were three such special places in the world. In all his books, he had never even heard of them. But they are not as amazing as you might imagine. The three major academies are relics of the old era. Take Wallace, for example. Even if he entered Crown Academy, he would be one of the top talents there, and there are only a few people who can compare to him. Master Victor explained, having put quite some effort into his explanation. For the second choice, I'm offering you a chance to enroll in Crown Academy. There, you can have tuition waived, free accommodation, meals, and the freedom to study various battle tactics for breeders, coordinators, and all kinds of trainers. However, choosing this option means you'll have to go through a strict exam. If you fail, you'll lose both the opportunities simultaneously. Before Terence's eyes were the two paths. The first one, obtaining the trainer qualification, might allow him to gradually achieve his dreams through hard work. But no one can say for sure what could happen during this process. The second one is to gain a chance to enter Crown Academy through an unknown exam. The academy mentioned by Master Victor couldn't be a simple place. Although he wouldn't be able to obtain the trainer qualification, the opportunity to receive free accommodation and meals, along with formal education in areas such as coordinator, breeder, and tactics, seems like an irresistible offer. Furthermore, the academy produces outstanding graduates who go on to achieve remarkable accomplishments, making them highly sought after by various major organizations. Have you decided? I have decided. Without hesitation, as a qualified transmigrator, Terence knew what kind of choice to make. There are two options, the obvious easy mode and the hard mode. For someone pressed for time like him, there is no reason to choose the easy mode. As Master Victor thought, only through trials and tribulations can Terence make greater progress. I'm willing to take the exam. Terence, with the shrewd gaze of a transmigrator, believed that Master Victor also wanted him to make this choice. Are you really sure? If you fail the exam I have given you, you may lose all the opportunities. Master Victor once again tried to sway Terence's heart, but the more he did this, the less Terence was swayed. The hints are so clear, how could I refuse? Yes, I want to give it a try. Terence believed that Master Victor wouldn't make things too difficult for him. As long as there is a possibility of succeeding in the exam, he is determined to do his best to accomplish it. Haha, good, since you've chosen this path, let me tell you about Crown Academy first. It can also encourage you to work harder. As for the exam, it's not the time yet, Master Victor said with a smile. Terence's choice really pleased him. Crown Academy. Established 100 years ago by a master-level trainer of that time, Crown Academy was created to promote the trainer profession. After a century of development, although Crown Academy has not grown to the scale of the Pokémon League, it is recognized as an independent force by the Pokémon League. The overall strength of the Academy is formidable. Each generation of its president is no weaker than the Elite Four. The faculty members are also incredibly powerful, with many of them being graduates of the Academy. They come from various fields, including coordinators, breeders, trainers, scientists, and more. Even quite a few gym trainers and elites have studied at Crown Academy. Since the development of the Pokémon League, the number of trainers has increased significantly. With the establishment of regional conferences and gyms, the safety in the wild has improved, and trainers' benefits have increased. Trainers prefer to travel alone, collecting badges, capturing more Pokémons, and experiencing the joy of the journey. As a result, the status of the Academy has greatly declined. Although a few places still retain some traditional aristocratic schools and preschools, they don't hold much influence. Crown Academy, Silver Academy, and Champion Academy are the only three places that still hold the status of traditional academy. With a century of foundation and its public nature, Crown Academy is incomparable to other emerging aristocratic institutions and organizations. Master Victor is a graduate of Crown Academy and currently serves as its vice president. Therefore, he has enough confidence in Terence's enrollment. If you graduate from Crown Academy, you can even apply to Pokémon League for your own gym and enjoy the league's subsidies. Crown Academy has a 4-year program, consisting of the beginner class, intermediate class, advanced class, and graduation class. In theory, students enter at the age of 10 and graduate at the age of 14. But that's just a theory. Only a few exceptionally talented individuals can pass the Academy's graduation exam. Some people even waste their time until their 20s without graduating and end up being advised to drop out. On the other hand, there are geniuses who apply for skipping grades and complete the entire curriculum in 2 or 3 years, possessing strength equal to or even surpassing the teachers. This is Crown Academy, a cradle of geniuses that has been abandoned by time, yet continues to pass on a spark of legacy through recommendations, nurturing, and other means. Chapter 20, Going Back to Mt. Chimney. Crown Academy's matter was of great concern to Terence. The old man's test naturally had great benefits for Terence's development, and Terence could see that Master Victor had high hopes for him. Unlike the geniuses like Wallace who already have a master, or geniuses like June with a privileged background, people like Terence often earn Master Victor's favor. After the breeder examination concluded and everything settled down, Wallace bid farewell to Terence and others, and embarked on a new training journey on his own. As for June, she was taken away by her family after successfully becoming a junior breeder. Originally, they also invited Master Victor to join them, but he declined the celebration dinner for Terence. "Are you ready?" Looking at Terence's calm expression, Master Victor asked with anticipation. The test he prepared was purely a personal matter. Initially, he intended for little June to complete it, but unexpectedly, he encountered Terence, who is surprisingly more suitable for this test compared to little June. This made him change his mind. "The place we're going to is Mt. Chimney." Mt. Chimney, Terence was familiar with this place. It was located beneath Fallarbor Town, where he had lived for 4 years. However, he didn't expect to return there so soon. But this time, his return wasn't homecoming after traveling outside. He had no intention of going back to the old greenhouse to share good news. The purpose of this journey was Master Victor's test. The contents of the test could be quite challenging, Master Victor said, even feeling a bit hesitant about the matter. Terence and Master Victor set off on a private plane. Mt. Chimney was a volcano, but it wasn't dull. Surrounding it was an environment resembling a forest with thick vegetation. Upon arriving here, Terence knew that this was the center of Mt. Chimney, unlike the peripheral area where he trained with Beautifully before. A large number of Pokémon inhabited this place, beyond the reach of humans. "Where are we going?" Terence asked. Up until now, Master Victor hadn't told him the exact details of the test. "We're going to meet a Pokémon." Despite his aged body, Master Victor strolled through this environment with remarkable ease. Swish! A Seavipper lunged forward, but before Terence could react, it was swiftly sent flying. In front of him was a Pidgeot, its magnificent wings having just finished flapping. Its sharp gaze resembled that of a king as they fixed on the Seavipper. With only a slight resistance, as the Seavipper was sent flying, the surrounding trees bent, causing a significant disturbance. This Pokémon should belong to Master Victor. Terence had already noticed the Pokeball in his hand. "Be careful, the Pokémon around here aren't very friendly," Master Victor said with a cheerful smile. Following that, Master Victor continued instructing Pidgeot, saying, "Call it out." "It? Who was it?" Unfurling its magnificent wings, Pidgeot took to the sky with astonishing speed, gracefully soaring and circling overhead. Boom! A tremendous storm was summoned, and the howling wind could be heard crystal clear by Terence. It's been raised so well. Even with Terence's limited experience, he could tell from the shining wings of Pidgeot and the beautiful feathers on its head that it was an outstanding Pidgeot. It's truly a top-level Master's Pokémon. What is it calling out? Terence looked up, filled with curiosity. What is the connection between Master Victor's words going to meet a Pokémon and his test? After arriving at Mt. Chimney, Terence couldn't help but anticipate what his test would be like. Under the clear sky with drifting clouds, the enormous storm conjured by Pidgeot adorned the beautiful scenery. Soon, without making them wait long, in response to Pidgeot's call, a tiny black dot gradually appeared amidst the continuous clouds. Immediately, the black dot grew larger and larger, and with its arrival came a beautiful melody that reached their ears. That's Altaria. Terence finally saw the full appearance of the Pokémon. Its elegant silhouette resembled that of a swan, and its sky-blue body showcased its nobility. Its fluffy wings were as soft as cotton, and its enchanting singing was intoxicating. Altaria, a valuable dragon-type Pokémon. It seems it has arrived. Watching Altaria's arrival, Master Victor smiled and said to Terence, "This test offers you 2 opportunities, one is a spot at Crown Academy, and the other is its acknowledgement." "What kind of acknowledgement?" Terence was somewhat confused. Look, they're fighting. Master Victor watched the sky helplessly as Altaria, which had just arrived, launched an attack directly against Pidgeot. Terence remained silent, waiting for Master Victor's explanation. You know my research direction, inherited moves. Yes, Terence nodded. This Altaria is a Pokémon I've been observing for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, it possesses a magical power, or rather, one of its parents or ancestors was a purebred dragon-type Pokémon from the Kanto region Dragonite. So, I set a trap, bonding it with my Pidgeot. Master Victor looked at Terence's strange expression and chuckled. I have prepared for this research for a long time. If my direction is correct, it is likely that an exceptionally talented Swablu will be born, capable of rivaling Dragonite and Tyranitar in terms of racial advantages. For Altaria, whose race is naturally at a disadvantage among dragon types, this will be a great opportunity to rise. Then, according to you, which area will this Swablu specialize in? Terence asked. Its specialization, hey. Perhaps, it will be able to comprehend multiple moves shortly after hatching. Don't underestimate it. A different starting point will undoubtedly lead to different achievements. If everything goes as planned, it is highly possible for it to learn a powerful move like Dragon Rush at an early stage. Swablu? Dragon Rush? Terence found it hard to believe. Nothing is impossible. Master Victor waved his hand. My Pidgeot also has a trace of dragon bloodline, although it's faint. But with the medicines I have prepared, it is enough to activate Swablu's higher dragon-type talent. But what's the current situation? Terence raised his head, looking at the two Pokémon engaged in a fierce battle, not understanding the connection between Master Victor's words and the ongoing fight. At this point, Victor smiled, and seeing Master Victor's smile, Terence suddenly had a bad feeling. However, it seems Altaria is somewhat dissatisfied with my methods and doesn't approve of me. But how could I easily give up? So, after defeating it in battle, I made a bet with it. Chapter 21, Bet. Bet? Terence asked. It's a small matter. Altaria still holds a grudge against me and refuses to entrust Swablu to me. But I can't give up on my research on Swablu, so I agreed to help it find an outstanding trainer to take care of Swablu. At first, I chose Little June, but now I've chosen you. Me? Terence was taken aback. Yes, this test would be challenging for a girl like Little June, who grew up in a big family since childhood. But with you, there is a glimmer of hope, Master Victor said. As long as you can raise Swablu's egg, successfully hatch it, and gain Swablu as well as its mother's approval within a month, your test will be considered complete. For this month, you will stay here alone. I will provide you with food and necessary tools for daily life. From now on, you will face the environment of MT Chimney on your own. During this time, you cannot bring any other Pokémon with you and can only rely on Swablu. That's Altaria's condition, Master Victor explained. Initially, he found this condition of Altaria to be quite shameless, but when he thought about his experiment, he didn't care about anything else. Terence froze upon hearing these words. Is he joking? Making him live alone here for a month is simply impossible. Let's put aside the fact of raising an aggressive Pokémon, the boredom alone would torture him to death. Moreover, it wasn't over yet. He also had to gain Altaria's approval. It seems they have had enough fighting. Now it's time for you to take the stage. Amidst the back and forth fight, even though Terence was on the ground, he could feel the intense shockwaves in the sky. Terence raised his head and saw Altaria and Pidgeot slowly descending. Eventually, they stopped in front of them. Long time no see, Master Victor greeted Altaria, but Altaria ignored him and instead looked at Terence. He is the trainer I have chosen, Master Victor calmly stated. As per your request, I have brought the person for the test. From now on, he will undergo a month-long trial with your child. Don't worry, I guarantee you as a top-level breeder that your child will not be ruined. Its growth will astound you. Altaria, a proud and elegant Pokémon, was unaware that Pidgeot who it had bonded with had long been tamed by him and had fallen into Master Victor's scheme. After everything was done, Master Victor appeared before Altaria. Then, a clash arose. Master Victor asked for the Pokémon egg but failed, then following a fierce battle, this bet was set. In the end, Altaria didn't sever ties with Pidgeot, it was just resentful that Pidgeot didn't inform it beforehand. With a long cry, Altaria turned its head around, conveying its meaning to Master Victor, who then said to Terence, "Are you ready? You still have room for refusal." Refusal? In this situation, how could he possibly refuse? "What do I have to do?" Terence glanced at Altaria and asked Master Victor. "It's simple. Come back with me first. By this time tomorrow, everything will be prepared, and then you will begin your month-long wilderness survival." Being adequately prepared meant that Terence would leave behind his Pokeballs, carry essential items and food, and return here by himself. Within 1 month, Terence had to not only successfully hatch Swablu but also act as its trainer, nurturing it to become stronger and gain Altaria's recognition. Initially, Master Victor had intended to capture Swablu himself, but Altaria's stubbornness forced him to abandon that choice. So Master Victor settled for the second option and found Terence to fulfill the bet on his behalf. His main purpose was to simply prove his theory and research. Though it was regrettable that he couldn't personally capture Swablu, for someone of Master Victor's status, it was no longer as important. Now, his eyes were solely focused on the unwavering pursuit of researching new things. "It all depends on you, Terence, whether the intergenerational inheritance will succeed," Master Victor said solemnly. He was also nervous, unsure if Swablu could inherit the extraordinary moves of both its mother and Pidgeot. Other moves don't matter, but if it can master Dragon Rush, it means that Swablu's Dragon-type talent has been fully activated. On the private plane, Master Victor explained the precautions and key points of the test to Terence. In essence, the likelihood of inheriting a move like Dragon Rush is extremely low, even for offspring born from a new union between Altaria and Dragonite. Moreover, this was the case of intergenerational inheritance, so whether the medicines prepared by Master Victor would be effective was also a matter of great importance to him. This Altaria was the overlord of MT Chimney. According to Master Victor, Altaria's strength was not inferior even to Pokémon trained by the Elite Four. His Pidgeot falls short in comparison to Altaria in terms of strength, so Terence has a long and arduous journey ahead of him if he wants to earn Altaria's recognition. The reason he didn't let Terence immediately start the test was that Master Victor needed to teach him about training moves, nurturing young Pokémon, hatching Pokémon eggs, and other knowledge to better tap into Pokémon's potential. Fortunately, Terence's learning speed could keep up with Master Victor's teachings. For Master Victor, this bet was important to him. The process of Terence training Swablu was a proof of his achievements. How far Swablu could progress in a month and how much of its potential could be unleashed was also a matter of concern to Master Victor. Now, with the presence of Terence, an excellent breeder, Master Victor's worries were finally resolved. Regarding this bet, although he couldn't carry it out himself, there are many young trainers who meet Altaria's requirements for potential, but they did not fully meet his requirements. Terence's arrival truly brought hope to Master Victor. After one night of preparation, Terence remembered all the precautions Master Victor had mentioned. Terence also remembered the terrain here quite well. Once he ventured in, there would be aggressive Pokémons, making it difficult to move forward initially. Fortunately, the nutrient solution provided by Master Victor would expedite the hatching of the Pokémon egg at the fastest speed possible. Inside the elongated container, there was an ample amount of pale blue nutrient solution. Master Victor personally prepared this liquid based on the condition of Altaria and Pidgeot. It would effectively stimulate the potential of this new life. It was also the main thing to be proven in this test. If Terence successfully completed this test, not only would he be able to enter the Cradle of Geniuses, Crown Academy, but this newly born life that would endure a month of trials and tribulations with him, the Swablu with extraordinary talent as Master Victor had mentioned, would also become Terence's Pokémon after they obtained Altaria's recognition. Chapter 22 First Night. When Terence was at the old greenhouse, besides studying breeder knowledge, he never neglected his physical training. However, because most of his energy was focused on studying, his physique was only slightly better than that of his peers on average. Holding the container, Terence arrived under a tree and took out a fruit to quench his dry mouth. Although the road was difficult to travel, the humans in this world have excellent physiques, and with Terence's physique, he could still endure it. The optimal incubation temperature for flying-type Pokémon is 40 degrees. Although the nutrient solution releases heat, the temperature is still not enough, especially considering Swablu's Dragon-type bloodline has been greatly enhanced. I need to find a suitable place to hatch it. Looking down at the thermometer in his hand, Terence knew that if the incubation temperature of a regular flying-type Pokémon egg exceeded 40 degrees, the embryo could die. However, Swablu has nutrient solution to regulate it, so the optimal temperature could be slightly increased. A favorable hatching environment also has a significant impact on a Pokémon's innate potential. The white egg with blue patterns floated in the center of the nutrient solution, swaying as if it could break at any moment. After observing it for a while, Terence prepared to go to the upper level of Mt. Chimney. That area was close to the volcanic crater, and the outermost temperature might be suitable for Swablu's birth. Early in the morning today, Altaria descended with the Pokémon egg. According to Master Victor, if this Swablu was raised well, it would not be inferior to the main Pokémon of Elite Four of various regions. This greatly motivated Terence. Although a Pokémon's potential didn't necessarily mean everything, it was still a good start, and Terence had confidence in raising Swablu well. While talent was important, hard work was also crucial. High above in the sky, a dark shadow observed Terence's every move. It was Altaria. Although Terence was the examinee this time, Altaria couldn't help but worry about its own child. If the Pokémon egg was threatened, it would appear immediately. In the shadow of the forest, another figure also kept an eye on Terence. It was Master Victor's Pokémon, currently carrying out Victor's order to secretly protect Terence. Without Beautifully, it was too dangerous for Terence to wander alone in the forest. No one could guarantee that nothing unexpected would happen. However, Terence was unaware of this at the moment. Swish, swish. Terence, who had already set off, suddenly saw a shadow jump up and quickly hugged the Pokémon egg, assuming a defensive and escaping posture. But after Terence saw who it was, he breathed a sigh of relief. It was a very small brown creature that looked like an acorn. C. Shaking his head, Terence avoided the little guy. This Pokémon often scares other Pokémon who are searching for food in the forest because it looks too much like a regular acorn. This has led them to develop a peculiar and intimidating nature, especially when Pidgey, who is hunting for food, is often scared by C. C. Usually doesn't initiate attacks, so after successfully scaring Terence, it hopped directly into the bushes. It was a false alarm. Fortunately, it wasn't an aggressive Pokémon. Mt. Chimney was not close, and Terence was very cautious throughout the journey, carefully observing the surroundings. However, by the afternoon, he still hadn't reached Mt. Chimney. There's a lake. The forest lake could be considered a small ecosystem, often inhabited by many Pokémon because many Pokémon would come here to drink water at certain times. This place was already close to Mt. Chimney, and Terence didn't expect to come across a lake. At this moment, there weren't many Pokémon around the lake. As he approached, Terence could clearly see Barboach swimming in the lake. However, as soon as these Barboach noticed Terence approaching, they immediately submerged into the muddy soil in the lake. Splash! Splash! Two sounds appeared simultaneously, causing splashes of water to fly up from the lake. Terence stood behind, witnessing two Marill jumping into the water to play. Around here, there should be many other Pokémon, but Terence hadn't noticed any. He didn't want to linger, so he continued walking towards Mt. Chimney. Seeing these water-type Pokémon, a mix of joy and sadness filled Terence's heart. Beautifully was not actually the first Pokémon at the old greenhouse. When Terence had arrived, Grandma Arlen had another Pokémon by her side, a Vaporeon. However, the Vaporeon was too old and passed away shortly after Terence's arrival. As a result, Grandma Arlen fell seriously ill. Losing a companion who had been by your side for decades would bring grief to anyone's heart. Terence sighed. He doesn't like this kind of feeling of life and death separation. As he looked at the small life about to be born in his hands, Terence couldn't envision what the future would hold several decades later. However, now was not the time to think that far ahead. Swablu had not yet hatched, and a bright future awaited them. Holding the Pokémon egg, Terence eagerly anticipated the birth of the small life. Once I cross these thickets, I should be able to reach Mt. Chimney, right? Terence continued on, recalling Master Victor's words. Some paths may be blocked by thickets, but in the wilderness, it is better to traverse through difficult paths with thickets than to venture onto rocky paths. Click, click. Terence had already prepared a small knife. There were obvious signs of human activity in this area, and the path seemed relatively clear. After stowing the Pokémon egg in his backpack, Terence forged ahead, clearing his way through the thorny vegetation. However, by dusk, Terence had still not emerged from this thicket. Coming to a halt, Terence decided to rest here for the night. In this environment, it was clear that Pokémon did not inhabit this kind of place, making it relatively safe. During his first night here, Terence felt incredibly lonely. Unlike before, Beautifully was not by his side. The cold, pitch-black night sky constantly stimulated Terence's senses. This was the first time he had lived alone in the wilderness, and to be honest, Terence disliked this feeling. Humans were social creatures, and the more people around, the more secure one would feel. Perhaps it was because Terence had just embarked on his journey, but he was still somewhat unaccustomed to this situation. As night fell, although this place was located beneath a volcano, it was completely different from the scorching heat during the day. A slight chill crept into Terence's heart. To protect Swablu's egg, he had no choice but to hold it tightly and fall asleep, providing it a comfortable environment with his own body temperature. This test could also be considered as Terence's own trial. It would last for a whole month, which was not considered long for any trainer. However, faced with this indescribable sense of unfamiliarity, Terence couldn't help but be amazed. The feeling of being completely isolated from civilization, different from regular travel, was truly uncomfortable. Chapter 23, Hatching. When Terence reached the top of Mt. Chimney, it was already noon of the next day. Searching for a smooth path, he carried a thermometer and examined the local conditions everywhere he went. After a long while, the thermometer finally reached a level that pleased Terence. Overjoyed, he arrived at a spot next to a red giant rock. Although this area is located in a volcanic zone, it is only the periphery, so it can't be described as scorching. Instead, one could say it is quite warm. Normally, with the excellent adaptability of a Pokémon, it could successfully hatch without so much trouble. However, Terence still wanted to create an ideal environment. Once he found a place he liked, it was time for him to prepare. Swablu was on the verge of hatching now, just a small opportunity away. Considering the favorable environment here, it wouldn't take long before Swablu could successfully break out of its shell. During this time, Terence needed to scatter some self-made powder to prevent other Pokémon from interfering. The scent of this powder was highly disliked by Pokémon in this area, making it an essential item when he used to go alone to Fallarbor Woods. In addition to that, he also had some other trinkets. Even the initial food for Swablu had been carefully prepared by him. After completing a series of tasks, exhaustion crept over Terence, making him feel a bit sleepy. Although he took breaks, his continuously moving forward and focused attention consumed his mental energy at all times. He longed to take another nap. That summarized Terence's current mood, but the Pokémon egg was now on the verge of hatching. Even in his weariness, Terence didn't want to give up. He wanted to witness Swablu's birth with his own eyes. It was a responsibility that a trainer or breeder cannot avoid. If he missed the hatching of this Pokémon egg, the word regret wouldn't be enough to describe his feelings. However, sleepiness was hard to resist. Terence occasionally picked up his water bottle from his backpack and took a sip, attempting to clear his mind. 10 minutes. 30 minutes. 2 hours. The Pokémon egg floated in the nutrient solution, its swaying frequency continuously attracting Terence's attention. 3 hours. After a significant passage of time, Terence was taking his fourth sip of water, when suddenly, he accidentally choked on it. Cough, cough. Setting the water bottle aside, Terence slapped his chest a few times, but luckily, this little disturbance alleviated his sleepiness to some extent. Wiping the water droplets off his lips, before he could regain his composure, a dazzling white light instantly filled his vision. This is... Terence tried to open his eyes wide, his brown irises fixed on the Pokémon egg inside the container. His previously calm expression had finally changed. Crack! Seemingly stimulated by something, the incubator instantly cracked under the intense light, causing the pale blue nutrient solution to spill onto the floor. However, Terence was too preoccupied at the moment to pay much attention to it. He reached out and carefully lifted the Pokémon egg that was securely fixed at the bottom of the container. The dazzling light gradually dimmed during this process, until finally, with a series of cracking sounds, spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the white Pokémon egg with blue patterns. Ignoring his rapidly pounding heart, Terence held his breath. At this moment, he seemed to have lost all traces of sleep. Come on! Terence inwardly cheered for this little life in his heart. He nervously watched as the tiny guy broke out of its shell, a graceful, sky-blue body with fluffy wings like cotton. Seeing the little one successfully hatch, Terence breathed a sigh of relief. For the smooth birth of Swablu, he had waited a full 7 hours. He hadn't expected the little fellow to endure that long. Even on the verge of hatching, it took its sweet time, taking a whole 7 hours. Evening had come again, and everything was calm and peaceful. Swablu gently flapped its wings in Terrence's palm, looking blankly at the outside world. Finally, upon seeing Terrence, its body gradually relaxed, and a sense of familiarity slowly arose in its heart. It chirped happily, as if wanting to get closer to Terrence. Terrence himself had a feeling that Swablu wished to climb onto his head, as if it could stay comfortably like that. After a careful thought, Terrence gently placed Swablu on his head and slowly sat down. For some reason, it loves quietly climbing onto people's heads and pretending to be a hat. It has wings that resemble cotton, and when it gently rests on someone's head, it looks like a fluffy cotton ball. Swablu possesses cotton-like, lightweight, and fluffy wings. This Pokémon is not afraid of humans. When it lands on someone's head, it looks like a fluffy cotton hat. Impressions of Swablu floated in Terrence's mind. He knew that this behavior was a natural habit of Swablu. Feeling Swablu moving around on his head, although it felt a bit strange, Terrence subconsciously refrained from disturbing the little guy. After just a few minutes of playing, this newly born life grew tired and quietly lay down on Terrence's head to sleep. As for the food Terrence had prepared, it was not urgent to feed Swablu at this moment. After tossing about in the nutrient solution for so long, Swablu had already absorbed enough nutrients. Terrence extended his finger and touched the nutrient solution in the broken container. He speculated that at least 70% of the nutrients had been absorbed, which was already a very good number. Additionally, the environment here probably played a significant role in achieving this number. One must understand that the ingredients contained in the nutrient solution carefully prepared by Master Victor couldn't be ordinary. With such a solid foundation, Swablu would likely experience an explosive growth during the early stage, and within just a month, it would probably already mature. That's why Master Victor had the confidence to make the bet. Generally speaking, the beginner Pokémon given to rookie trainers in each region are in their early stages of growth. Only a few Pokémon, due to certain circumstances, mature a little earlier. These kinds of Pokémon are difficult for ordinary rookie trainers to handle, but their strength is often slightly superior. The Pokémon distributed by the League at the beginning are at a nearly basic stage. At this time, a Pokémon's growth has just begun, and it serves as the best test of a trainer's training and breeding abilities. The improvement of a Pokémon's strength is closely related to the trainer's guidance and cannot be separated. Terrence was looking forward to Swablu's growth. However, he was already tired. His usual routine was fairly disciplined, but ever since leaving Fallarbor Town, the series of events had surpassed his initial plans. Now, with Swablu slowly falling asleep, Terrence cradled the little guy and slipped into the tent. Fortunately, the surroundings weren't too cold, so they could enjoy a peaceful sleep. After this night passed, they would embark on a brand new journey. Chapter 24, Swablu's First Fight. Morning. Under empty chimney. Swablu was perched on Terrence's head, who was dressed in casual attire, curiously observing everything around. For a newly hatched little creature, everything outside was a novelty. As the one who had been by Swablu's side from the beginning, Terrence held a special place in its heart. Even without the binding of the Pokeball, Swablu regarded Terrence as its sole family. The moment Terrence gently placed the just-hatched Swablu on his head, their connection was destined. When a trainer captures a new Pokémon, the initial expression displayed by the Pokémon is often one of confusion and docility. But the gaze Swablu directed towards Terrence was one of intimacy and reliance. Terrence's smile never left his face as he gazed at the Swablu, theoretically his first captured Pokémon. This extraordinary little creature would be closely tied to his future. Chirp. Welcoming the rising sun, Terrence gently stroked Swablu. Swablu seemed to enjoy the touch, comfortably lying on Terrence's hair, exuding a hint of laziness. This won't do. Terrence smiled lightly and spoke. With the month-long test deadline in front of him, it wasn't leisure and vacation awaiting him and Swablu. During this month, they would go through continuous battles, training, and honing. Only in this way could Swablu's potential and foundation be fully unleashed. It had been just over 10 days since leaving Fallarbor Town, and Terrence had already met Master Victor and become a junior breeder. Not only that, he had also possibly obtained a second Pokémon that he was extremely satisfied with, even pleasantly surprised. This filled Terrence with hope for the future. To live up to Master Victor's expectations and rightfully become Swablu's trainer, Terrence was determined to make the most of the remaining month. Even if it meant enduring hardships and exhaustion, in order to obtain Swablu and enter Crown Academy, he believed that all the efforts made during this month would be worthwhile. Furthermore, if he couldn't handle this little bit of hardship, how could he expect to make a name for himself and give a better life to everyone at Old Green House? When Terence was coming here, he had already marked the safe places, so the places he and Swablu passed by weren't too dangerous. Rustle rustle. As Terence and Swablu moved forward, the sound of rustling grass reached their ears. Quickly glancing over, Terence's heart filled with joy. Found it! There, a creature with a body made up of red and white, a small bug with sharp spikes on its red back, crawled out slowly, its eyes fixed on them. Terence naturally wasn't wandering without purpose. To understand Swablu's situation as soon as possible, it needed an opponent. However, this opponent couldn't be too strong. Swablu had just been born, and despite its great potential, its current strength was very weak. So, Wurmple, a Pokémon at the bottom of the food chain, naturally became the best choice. However, there weren't many Wurmple around Mt. Chimney, and it took them quite some time to find one. This unfortunate fellow before them was the one. At this moment, it had no idea that it had become the practice partner in Terence's eyes. Having previously raised a Wurmple to evolve into Beautifully, Terence was well aware of the characteristics of this common Pokémon. Overall, Wurmple's strength wasn't considered very strong. However, when pushed to a life-or-death situation, they would unleash toxins from the spikes on their rear end and fight fiercely to the end. Therefore, if someone doesn't provoke them too much, they can be good targets for bullying. After all, Wurmplees only know a few moves like Tackle, String Shot, and Poison Sting. With a bit of caution, Swablu should not have a problem dealing with it. Although Swablu isn't their natural enemy, being a bird-type Pokémon gives it an inherent advantage against Wurmplees. Moreover, Terence was prepared with an ample supply of basic items. He had potion and antidote in sufficient quantities. Alright, this is our first battle on the path to becoming stronger. Terence encouraged Swablu. As a trainer, with personal strength, one can sometimes suppress certain Pokémon, but the most important thing is to command your Pokémon in battle. Terence is the controller of the situation, a participant but not directly involved in the fight. After a night of adaptation and growth, Swablu is now able to fly on its own. Although it may not appear entirely graceful, Terence was already quite satisfied with the progress it had made. With a few more days of practice and further development of its wings, Swablu should be able to fly through the air with even greater ease. Even though Swablu has just been born and it may seem a bit earlier, it still carries some fighting genes in its blood. So, this novel concept of fighting was intriguing to Swablu. It could also feel the energy contained within its body. Some basic moves seem to be ingrained in a Pokémon's memory. Under Terence's command, Swablu flew towards Wurmple, seemingly wanting to show its might. Wurmple, realizing the approaching threat, didn't turn tail and flee, which relieved Terence. Swoosh! A string shot out from Wurmple's mouth, surprising Swablu. Additionally, without Terence's command, Swablu fell victim to the attack right from the start. Find a solution, Terence calmly observed. While Pokémon rely on their trainer's commands, they also need a certain level of instinct when it comes to basic things like dodging attacks, finding openings for attack, and capitalizing on the opponent's mistakes. One could call it battle awareness. These things need to be experienced by the Pokémon from the beginning. If a Pokémon develops its own style, it's too late to try and change it. Swablu, entangled in white silk, cried out in pain as it fell to the ground. However, upon hearing Terence's words, it immediately adjusted its posture and used its sharp beak to peck at the silk on its body. The first move, Peck Attack. Terence muttered to himself. Peck Attack was Swablu's most basic move, nothing extraordinary when executed. However, at this moment, a faint white halo shimmered around Swablu's sharp beak, indicating a slight improvement in the potency of the Peck Attack. To perfectly utilize Peck Attack, most of the energy should be concentrated in the beak. Swablu still has a long way to go to achieve that level. Peck, hey? It seems like I need to come up with a training plan for this move. Having extensively studied the knowledge about breeding Pokémon, Terence knows that many trainers make a common mistake, i.e. they tend to overlook moves that are considered weak or impractical in battles. However, little did they know that these moves, although they might not hold significant tactical value in battles, play a crucial role in stimulating a Pokémon's growth and affect their overall development in subtle ways. Chapter 25, Feather Dance. Regarding basic moves, Terence believes that they can facilitate the understanding of more advanced moves while also playing a crucial role in a Pokémon's growth. For example, Terence once read in a newspaper about a trainer with a fondness for Charizard. He was training two Charmander at the same time, one with great potential, rapidly increasing its strength, and successfully evolving into Charizard in less than a year. Moreover, it quickly grasped the move Dragon Claw with its exceptional talent. On the other hand, the other Charmander persisted with basic training, starting from the basic move Scratch, gradually comprehending Slash and Metal Claw, and diligently practicing them step by step. After this Charmander also evolved into Charizard, with meticulous guidance, it likewise comprehended Dragon Claw effortlessly. In fact, this Charmander's Dragon Claw surpassed the previous one in terms of claw strength, sharpness, and smooth execution. After conducting some investigation, Terence understood that basic moves were not as useless as he had imagined. Take the move Scratch, for instance. During Charmander's training, it can effectively strengthen the power of its arms, sharpen its claws, and enhance the strength of its spine. This has a significant impact on later moves that it learns like Metal Claw, Slash, and Dragon Claw. Additionally, the growth of its claws also contributes to the strength of its arms and wings after evolution. Therefore, most basic moves have their corresponding value. If they are overlooked simply because they may not seem strategically valuable, it would be a case of sacrificing long-term gains for short-term benefits. As Terence pondered, Swablu flew towards Wurmple once again. Knowing Wurmple's attack pattern, Swablu easily evaded the string shot this time, gliding on its wings to a position above Wurmple. Its tender beak emitted a faint glow as it attempted to use Peck move. However, Swablu's body wasn't very coordinated during flight. When it dove down, its attack was easily dodged by Wurmple, which hastily evaded. Although Swablu wanted to pursue him, the Peck attack lasted only a short time, and the effect of the move disappeared. Not only power, but also duration, i.e. energy control, needs practice. Terence noticed a new problem. If Swablu could effectively control the duration and energy of Peck move, it would be the right time for Swablu to learn Fury Attack. By then, relying on Peck attack alone, Swablu would be able to perform multiple consecutive strikes without the energy dissipating midway. However, achieving this would require extensive practice. Observing the two Pokémon once again, Terence saw that Swablu had ceased its attack on Wurmple. Without hesitation, Wurmple immediately turned around, curled up, and swiftly charged towards Swablu. Witnessing this scene, Swablu appeared extremely flustered. It flapped its wings in an attempt to take flight, but Wurmple was not far from Swablu. In its panicked state, Swablu couldn't escape smoothly. However, to Terence's surprise, as Swablu flapped its wings, though it didn't manage to take off, numerous white, cotton-like feathers detached from its wings. They swarmed around Wurmple, entangling it. Cotton guard? No more likely feather dance. Terence almost blurted it out. Theoretically, Swablu should not be able to use or even learn this move. However, based on Master Victor's analysis, Swablu, possessing a dual lineage of Pidgeot and Altaria, had a high probability of inheriting this move. Now, Terence believed in this hypothesis because he witnessed Wurmple being entangled by the cotton-like feathers and losing its fighting spirit under Swablu's pecking attack. After dealing with Wurmple, the little fellow clumsily flapped its wings and flew towards Terence, happily chirping in as if asking for praise. Good job, Terence smiled. Swablu had just been born not long ago, and although the opponent was also very weak, this first victory was already quite remarkable for it. This was just the first step, and Terence believed that with their joint efforts, Swablu would become even stronger. As a reward, Terence gave Swablu some snacks that flying-type Pokémon particularly enjoyed. Instantly, Swablu's mood became exceptionally cheerful, and it couldn't wait to engage in the next battle. With a smile, Terence remarked, "No need to rush." He took out some homemade potions and cleaned the wounds on Wurmple. Though the injuries were not severe, Terence was grateful for the battle between Wurmple and Swablu and didn't show stinginess. With its strength restored, Wurmple nodded and quickly scurried into the grass. At the same time, Terence prepared to find a relatively safe temporary shelter to spend the next month. Living in the wilderness for a month, a water source was essential. However, it was also a gathering place for Pokémon, and Terence didn't want to disturb them. Therefore, he had to find a location close to a water source that was relatively hidden as a residence for himself and Swablu. Terence has brought a tent and some common travel equipment, so as long as he was careful, there shouldn't be any major issues. After surveying several places, Terence found a total of 3 water sources. Unlike Earth, there were no terrifying microorganisms in the wilderness here. Overall, the environment was quite good, and the water sources were relatively clean. However, that didn't mean Terence was ready to use them as drinking water. He had already brought some drinking water for daily use, and looking for water sources was only for washing and other common activities. And of course, to quench Swablu's thirst. These water sources were mostly occupied by Pokémon, and considering Pokémon's bodies, even if they used these natural water sources, it wouldn't make them sick. As for humans, the worst-case scenario would probably be an upset stomach or something similar, but if the water was boiled, there shouldn't be much of a problem. After careful consideration, Terence chose a location on the edge of a mountain range. The environment and terrain here were relatively flat, and he also discovered a very secluded corner. It was perfect as a temporary residence. With the residence issue solved, the next problem to tackle was food. Although Terence brought some necessities, there wasn't much that could be used to stave off hunger. It wouldn't even last for 3 or 4 days, and most of it was the nutritional supplements Master Victor prepared for Swablu. So, for his own meals, Terence needed to search the forest for berries, wild vegetables, mushrooms, and similar things. At Terence's request, Victor also prepared some cooking utensils and a flint for him, so for the upcoming days, Terence would have to cook for himself. Fortunately, Terence had done this kind of thing before, so he was familiar with it. With Swablu accompanying him, they quickly found a few good spots for food ingredients. After filtering out things that were difficult to eat, they quietly returned to their original location. External issues had been resolved, and the temporary residence had been arranged. Now, Terence had to focus on more important matters, which meant training Swablu. Although Master Victor repeatedly emphasized that Swablu has great potential, Terence wasn't particularly enthusiastic about such things. Potential was an intangible and elusive concept. While it might manifest during growth, Terence still believed in the combination of hard work and natural talent as the perfect match.